If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
With Halloween just 2 months away, about 57 days, let's welcome the spooky season by sharing terrifying true paranormal and creepy encounters.
There was an old man/thing in my basement that only I could see. He looked in his 80s, thin and pale, with elf ears and sharp teeth. He was always sitting down on a spare dining room table we had. I, 5 or less at the time, would always go down with my mom because the laundry room was down there and I was scared to be alone. I was also scared of the basement, but to me, my mom was invincible, so I had some courage with her. Every time, it's the same thing. He eyes me down with this annoyed look and never once says anything. I always told my mom, and she would tell me no one is there. I grew up and chalked it up to my imagination until one day, 24 years old, I mentioned it in a family gathering, and my cousin, who lived with us then and was my age, also described the same man, same ears, teeth, color, build, and glance. When I moved into my first house, it had an awful vibe about it. I kept trying to tell myself I was spooking myself because an old graveyard was outside of my window. But it wasn't just me who felt it. It seemed anyone who entered the house had an uneasy feel. Especially around the stairs. The feeling was so strong I couldn't even bring myself to sleep up the stairs for the first 5 months. When I finally did sleep upstairs, I was woken in the night from feeling like I was being stared at. A little girl with pigtails peered around my doorframe, staring at me. That was horrifying. There were 3 of us in the house one day. We heard a huge crash from upstairs. After a battle over who was going to check it out, we all went up to find a torch had been thrown across the room and was smashed to pieces. It was one of those big high-beam torches. Other than those 2 things, it was mostly just toys going off on their own and noises from wherever you weren't. If you were upstairs, the noises would happen downstairs and vice versa. The feeling of being watched was constant. My childhood home was very active too, and I have loads of stories from there. But the feeling in my own first house was different, a much more sinister feel to it. I didn't last there long. Not exactly my story, but it does include me. My mother told me this story about when I was a baby, around 2 years old, I believe. For some context, there was my father, my mother, 2 of my older brothers, and me. We just moved into a house for the first time, and it had an attic, a main floor, and a basement. The basement contained the bedrooms. One specific room had steps that made it slightly lower than the other rooms. It was the biggest room, so my eldest brother claimed it. After a week, my brother complained about the lack of sleep and did not like the room. He kept saying something felt off. My other brother asked to switch, since he always wanted the biggest room. A week later, the same thing happened to him. He can't sleep right, the room feels wrong, and he claims to see things in the dark. My mother believes that it might just be a placebo effect mixed with young children moving to a new home they aren't familiar with. She then moves me into the room instead. I was there for 3 days and would cry each time it was bedtime. I would wake up and scream my lungs out until I lost my voice. On the 3rd day, my mother decided to throw baby powder everywhere in the room after my father went to work and while my brothers were getting ready for school. She would spray baby powder all over the floor, covering every surface. Something felt off. She took off with me and my brothers. We had our day like usual. Once everyone got home, my mother went into my room. Traces of 3 clawed human-sized footprints were everywhere. The floor, the walls, and even the ceiling. My mother called my father in a frenzy at the sight. We moved out a week later. The door was locked during that time, and I was moved into my parents' room for now. My grandfather owned an old bed and breakfast in the Adirondacks with 70 acres of land and a horse farm attached in the back. The main house was made in the early 1800s. When I was a kid, my family stayed up there for a week, and I and my sister were sharing a room. I woke up the next morning to the dresser in our room moved in front of the door, a linen cloth over my sister's face, and 2 coins over each of her eyes. The dresser weighed approximately 300 to 400 pounds, making it impossible for me to move it and exit the room, so I had to yell for my father, who eventually came through the window with a ladder and pushed it away from the door. I'm assuming this was the work of an entity who obviously did not want us there at all. I was 17 and had lived in an old house built back sometime between the 40s and 50s and had many paranormal experiences in that house and that neighborhood. Shadow people, strange noises, knocks at the door anywhere between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Strange apparitions. However, on this particular night, as I lay down to sleep, I sensed that something was off in the house. I knew something was going to happen. I should have known this one would have been different because the air felt different. I would usually get the normal sleep paralysis, but when I woke up this time, my body and mind were filled with fear. I would try and roll over to not see what would walk through the door or would be elsewhere around the room. I shouldn't have rolled over this time. When I rolled over, staring back at me was a pale old lady, and she looked awful, like sick yellow in the white of her eyes, and she was giggling and convulsing. I sprang out of my bed and could hear her walking down the hall until it was over. I stayed up that night from 1 a.m. until the sun came out. I was terrified. The same thing happened to my brother years later and in a different house. When he told me his story, it shook me, as I had not shared my encounter with anyone. I assumed I was going crazy back then, especially with the volume of my encounters that were appearing. Side note, back then I was studying esotericism. I had a monster that lived in my door. I saw it as a little boy, a little girl, and their grandfather. I was 8, and I never questioned why they were inside my door. Which should have been a red flag right there. But I liked to talk to them and play with them. The kids would play games with me while their grandfather just watched and smiled. This went on for a few months with them trying to convince me to walk into the door so we could play other games. They said they had a big world full of fun games for us to play. All I had to do was crawl into the door. I didn't understand how to do that, and my mom heard me talking to myself and asked me what was going on. I told her everything and pointed to the door. She said she didn't see anyone, but it unnerved her enough that I slept in her room that night and she slept in mine. The next morning, Mom was very upset and pale. She moved all of my stuff out of my bedroom and into hers. She then changed the lock on my bedroom door and locked it, ordering me to never go in there again. We moved a few months later. It took years before she told me why she did all of that. She said it was late at night and she heard voices. She looked toward the door and saw everything I told her. But they were angry she had taken me away. She said they melted into each other and became this monster that looked like melted plastic and had tentacles and a dozen eyes. She said it just felt evil, and she knew she couldn't be in there anymore. I was shocked by them. I found out all that and did some research about the house we lived in. Turns out the owner was really messed up and ended himself doing some ritual in the room that later became my bedroom. My friend saw a skinwalker in a park in her city and just opened up about it. Even as an adult, talking about it makes her cry. She wasn't interested in researching it, but I was. I love investigating. I dug a lot, going through just about every single paranormal thread looking for potential creature matches. I showed her bears, any animal possibility, and every time she just looked at me like I was being stupid. She knew what she saw, a four-legged beast walking like a dislocated human being, with an inhuman face and a mix of skin and hair. It ran fast, but then it disappeared. I identified the animal as a skinwalker, but the creepiest part has yet to come, the deaths. I researched more and started finding dozens of disappearances and bodies in the same park. Dozens of files of unexplained murders, heart attacks, and bodies. It's not a coincidence. They're here. A little Halloween encounter story. Mid-1960s, Appalachian Mountains, northeastern Pennsylvania, USA. This happened in the anthracite coal region of PA. We have a lot of forest and are surrounded by mountains. This happened back in the mid-60s. I was stunned to see someone talk about a pumpkin man because I had never heard it mentioned other than in that one story. This reminds me of a story that was told to me 50 years ago. A guy I knew was walking through the woods, shortcut path, when, out of the blue, he saw a man in a black suit with a pumpkin over his head. It was nodding its head as if to say, "Yes, you are seeing what you think you're seeing." Being 13 at the time, he got totally freaked out because it was so bizarre. He just ran. He looked back and saw that the figure was facing him and nodding, but it made no move to pursue him. I said, "Do you think it was someone trying to scare you as a joke?" It was after Halloween, so he didn't think so. He'd constantly used that path and never encountered anything weird. He said the guy was thin and tall and had very pale hands. Was it just some creep? I don't know, but my friend would no longer use that path when walking alone. He was terrified of seeing it again. The Night Screamer. In the spirit of Halloween, I want to share a story about an experience my family and I never found an explanation for. We live in rural Appalachia. This story happened back in the early 2000s when I was a young child. My dog woke my mom up barking. My dog was a skittish little poodle, and she got anxious very easily. My mom was trying to calm her down, but then all of a sudden, she started to hear what she heard, some sort of horrific and unexplainable noise coming from above. My dad woke up from the noise at this point, too, and ran to the door to see if he could see anything. By the time he got the door open, he could hear it about a fourth of a mile down the road. It went from right above to half a mile away in just seconds. The best way my parents can explain the noise is that it sounded almost like a woman screaming, but not quite. At one point it got so loud that it hurt their ears, so they had to cover them. My dad is a very logical man, and he's very educated on wildlife. Until this very day, he has no idea what this creature is. He knows what a panther sounds like, and he swears that it's not like this. I have my own ideas and theories on what this phenomenon could have been, but I want to share this story here to see what thoughts and theories people have or if anyone else has experienced this before. The oddest part about it all is that I'm the only one who never woke up, even between my dog barking and the loud screaming noise. I was roughly 5 or 6 years old at the time. Does anyone know what I saw? When I was about 14 years old, my cousin, who was around 12, was spending the night with me. We were in the living room, seated on the couch, watching television around 2 a.m., with all the lights turned off. The laundry room is right across from the living room with a small hall in between. All of a sudden my cousin grabbed my leg and pinched the crap out of me. All she could say was my name repeatedly a few times, and finally she told me to look in the laundry room. I turned my head to look and froze in my tracks with my mouth hanging open and everything. I will explain it the best I can. It was like looking at a shadow person but the complete opposite. It was the complete outline of a human body, but it was made of a bright white light. It was like staring at a bare light bulb. The thing didn't try to come at us or anything, it just seemed to float in place and kind of moved back and forth just a little. We probably sat there for what felt like forever, but I'm sure there were no more than a few minutes just watching the thing. Then my cousin grabbed my hand and yanked me off the couch. We ran across the living room to turn on the lamp. Once we walked back to where we could see the entranceway, the thing was gone. I've had all kinds of very weird experiences in this house since childhood, through my teen years, and even into adulthood. But this is the only time I've actually seen a physical manifestation. I've always tried to dismiss the experience, even asking my cousin several times if she remembered it, as I wondered if I had imagined it. She definitely remembers it, though. Is this a ghost? Something more? I have no idea. I work in an operating theater, and one night I arrived at work to start my night shift. I was the only one in my department because the rest of the team was working on a long case in another department. So I began doing all the jobs that needed doing while I was quiet, checking all the emergency equipment, stocking up, cleaning stuff, turning all the lights off, etc. Now I'm the only person in the unit, no one else can get in out of hours. It's swipe card access only, and the only other people on are all dealing with an emergency elsewhere. So around midnight I walk past one of the operating theaters, and all the lights are on. I know I turned them all off. So I thought it was weird, turned them off again, and walked around to see if anyone else was in the department. No one around. As I walk past again, the lights are on again. I thought someone was ducking with me now. So I turned them off and waited for a few minutes, expecting someone to say ha ha or something like that. But nothing. Complete silence. I didn't think any more of it and went and made a brew. An hour or so later I walked back, and the lights were on again. I thought, duck it, and left them on. Anyway, after a quiet night for me, the morning shift came to take over, so I handed over, saying that we'd had a quiet night upstairs but mentioned the weird thing with the lights in Theater 5. The individual I was passing the information to stated, yes, that is unusual, there was a fatality in that location during the previous night, a 5-year-old boy. It was truly unfortunate, as he was not in good health and passed away there due to some complications. His mum spent an hour with him in there, and when she eventually left him, for the porters to take him to the mortuary, she asked if the lights could be left on because he was scared of the dark. I don't really believe in that kind of stuff, but it made me shiver a little. The event was about 10 years ago. Where I lived as a child, and where my parents still live, there were farmers' fields close by, with a road running through them. My friends and I used to walk up there often. It was very twisty/windy and went up into a variety of bridges, which went over a motorway or other roads. Anyway, I was around 10 or 11, and although it was the end of summer, it was early evening but still pretty light and still quite warm, and I was walking along the road up through the fields with 2 friends, all female. As we got to the first bridge, you could look back across the fields and see the entire stretch of road we just walked. No one else was around, but at the very start of the road was a single figure, tall, so we assumed male. He wore a long dark coat, despite the warm weather, and a brimmed hat that resembled a fedora. We never thought much of it and carried on walking. At the next bridge, we could look back again, and the man had already reached the first bridge, which was odd because he must have jogged or something to reach it that quickly. By the time we reached the third bridge, he was closer still. We all started to feel really uneasy. Towards the end of the road, Before you cross a field and onto a main road, there are a couple of houses. We were that spooked by this man, we knocked at a house, an old lady opened the door, security chain in place, and we told her the situation, and she said it wasn't safe to let us in, and we'd be better off to carry on across the field to the road. With hindsight, we probably scared the crap out of her. She said she'd keep an eye out for the man, although what she'd actually do about that is anyone's guess. We ran across the field and down the hill to the road. As we reached the road, we again looked back, and the strange man was standing in the field we'd just crossed, just at the top of the hill, watching us. His face was shaded by his hat, so we couldn't see his face, but he was obviously looking straight at us. Then he just turned and walked away. We didn't go up there much after that. It could have been innocent, but it freaked us out. My mum was a cleaner, and one of her regulars was an old Danish man who lived in a bungalow by himself. He gave my mom old furniture and computers, and even my children were allowed to say hello when we would pick my mom up from work. My mom later told me that the old guy had a lot of sorrow family-wise. She felt sorry for him, and that's why he lived on his own. When my mom started there, she would get an uncomfortable feeling in the bathroom as if someone was in there with her. She just put it down to being in a new house and dismissed it. Until she saw the shadow of someone standing in the shower. She checked, no one was there. Soon Mum became so uncomfortable in that room that she wouldn't stay long and would clean it fast and get out of there. It got weirder for her until she was in the bathroom one morning and caught a quick reflection of a young man staring back at her. She thought there was someone else in the house and asked the old guy who was visiting. The old guy was nonplussed until Mum mentioned the bathroom mirror and what the young man looked like. Then the old fella told Mum about his 22-year-old son who used to live with him. He told Mum that his son passed away about 20 years before, and then he teared up. Mum asked him how his son died, sensing something tragic. The old guy told her his son committed suicide in the bathroom and that his wife had discovered him. His wife passed away about 5 years after, so the guy had been on his own for a while. He had a daughter, but she lived in another town, so he didn't see her much. He was alone in the bungalow with his son's ghost. A night I will never forget. This is an event that I will never forget. There is absolutely no way I could have mistaken this. Let's get into it. My sister and I were living in a townhouse together at this time. This was about 3 to 4 years ago. We lived in a small suburban town where everyone knew everyone. My town is filled with forests and cornfields. So when it was nighttime, it was eerie. Here is what happened. It was a Friday evening, and my sister and I were fighting over the phone about something minuscule. We both worked together as well, so you can imagine how heated our arguments can get spending that much time together. During the workday we are going at it over text, and it has gotten to a bad point where we may need to separate ourselves. As the clock hits 5 p.m., she leaves the office first. We are still texting and fighting over the phone to the point where I was almost in full-blown rage. I take a breather, pack my things, and head off back to the townhouse. I was contemplating going over to my parents' house, who live close by, but at that time I needed to cool down and be by myself. As I am driving, I am completely dreading seeing her there and having to go through yet another argument. I get to the townhouse, I take a deep breath, and I walk towards the front door, preparing myself for another useless argument. I walk in and head to the kitchen, and thankfully she was upstairs in her room. Her room is located right above the kitchen, and I can hear as clear as day a conversation she is having on the phone. Who was she talking about? You guessed. Me. She is calling me every name in the book, talking down on my character, and saying downright evil things. At this point I chose to call my mom to calm me down and tell her about the volatile situation we are having. I needed to talk to her about it in hopes that this argument can be done. As I am talking to my mom, I hear her notice I am home, and then she directly starts screaming at me to get the F out, you shit, and you stupid nasty. I was taken aback at the disgusting things she was saying. She has a very distinct voice that was just piercing through the walls. I snapped. I started screaming back. We are yelling through the ceiling, and my mom is hearing me scream with rage over the phone. She is hearing me go back and forth with her. My mom yells at me to stop. So I do. The next words she said terrified me. She quietly and slowly tells me, your sister is right next to me, she is with me right now at the house. Who are you yelling at? And that is when I learned about mimic spirits. An evil spirit was mimicking my sister to enrage and feed off the energy. Pray up and be aware. Ghost in the mirror. During our trip to Maine to visit my parents' friends, we stayed in a quaint little house that had been built in 1935. Located outside of town, the house offered a peaceful and secluded atmosphere. Something strange happened while I was in the bathroom. I caught sight of a ghostly apparition, just a face floating before me. It was a chilling experience that terrified me to the core. From that moment on, I could only bring myself to use the bathroom during daylight hours. However, my parents didn't seem to believe my account of the supernatural encounter. They continued using the bathroom without any concern, whether it was day or night. One night, about a month after my initial sighting, I mustered up the courage to enter the bathroom again. I convinced myself that what I had seen couldn't possibly be real. But to my dismay, the apparition appeared once more. The fear that gripped me was overwhelming, and I promptly made the decision that I would not spend the rest of the summer in that haunted house. Instead, I sought refuge in a nearby motel, where I stayed with my older brother, John. Curiously enough, my parents remained at the house for some time after my departure, yet they never encountered any supernatural phenomena. It seemed as though the ghostly presence was specifically targeting me, leaving them untouched. It was right next to us. This story is brief but still makes shivers send up my spine. I don't know what happened that night, but if I were alone, I would definitely not have slept. It was Halloween night. I know that sounds crazy, but that's when the worst and weirdest things happen. Before I say anything, I don't believe in ghosts, but I can't exactly explain this. I was with my friend Amelia and her friend Carly, who are both older than me by a year, but we get along well. We were spending Halloween together with my older brother and Amelia's brother. We all were done getting candy, but I was going to sleep over at their house. We decided to visit a girl up the street from us for fun, and we ate pizza, but it was pitch black outside, and once we left her cozy home, the three of us girls were chilled by the soft glow from the street lamps and the steep empty road. It was getting later, like about 10:30, so fewer people were out getting candy. It was just us. We began strolling down the sidewalk calmly talking to each other and giggling about whatever and totally sugar rushed from all the chocolate and Sour Patch Kids. We suddenly heard footsteps behind us. We didn't think much of the footsteps, but we started walking faster. Needless to say, we all turned and looked, but we saw nothing. The footsteps began speeding up, and before we knew it, we were running at full speed. I was so scared about something that seemed like nothing. But I promise something was there. We were almost home, but my legs ached so bad. I was running for my life, but I didn't even know what was there. Once we reached the safety of the home and the bright garage decorated with goofy skeletons and spiders with the adults slouching around in it, we felt safe. We headed inside and ate some more candy, like we needed it, and kind of laughed the situation off. It was time to sleep. It was now probably 11:45, and our eyes were getting droopy, so we all huddled in a comfy bed to rest. Around 12:30, we were all still awake but were actually on the verge of sleep when we heard two knocks. Knock, knock. We all heard them because we all sat up in the bed. "Did you hear that?" I asked, taking a breath. "Yes," they muttered, hoping it was nothing. Eventually we all fell asleep, but the morning was one we would remember forever. We were investigating the source of the knocking, and what startled me was that it seemed to come from the large painting right next to our bed. I still don't know what happened that Halloween, but it wasn't the parents or our brothers because they went to bed hours before us. And we never heard the door open once. Thank you for listening. Something I saw as a kid. I was at my grandma's house one time. I was around 4 years old at the time. It was right after Halloween, and I say this because I remember the tiger costume I wore that year. But anyway, I'm sitting on my grandma's lap eating some candy and watching TV with her when I happen to turn my head back and see someone moving from one of the bedrooms to the bathroom across the hallway. It happened fast, and the figure was all black but not like a shadow. It was a solid, cloaked-looking figure. At first I didn't know what to think. I just kept watching. I thought maybe it was my cousin, EZ, playing a prank on me because he liked to scare the shit out of me back then. But EZ wasn't there that weekend. He was supposed to be at a friend's house, and it was just me and Grandma until my grandpa got off work later. So I sat there, watching. And after a little time went by, I remember seeing the figure sort of poke its head out from the bathroom and wave at me. There was no face. It's like it was wearing a black veil and hood over its head. Anyway, it disappeared back into the bathroom before doing it again, popping out and waving at me. This time I alerted my grandma and told her there was someone in the bathroom. I was scared because I didn't know or understand who this could have been, but I know what I saw. My grandma gets up and walks down the hall to the bathroom. Mind you, no one ever exited the bathroom. Of course, after looking, there was no one there. I even followed her and looked. No one. So we checked all 3 other bedrooms after that, and there was no one in the house but us. I don't know what it was, and I don't know where it came from, but this is something that has always stuck with me. Years later, as an adult, I've had 2 dreams about the hooded shape, being, etc., but that's it. I've never encountered anything else like this before, and I say this as someone who's had a share of ghost run encounters. Anyone else have any ideas or similar experiences as a kid? I'm still unsettled to this day, and I just need to share this. If anyone has any ideas of what the incident was, even if it wasn't paranormal, please share. To be fair, I would also think this could be rationally explained if I did not personally experience it, or if it was a one-time event. Growing up, I was never the kid to worry about ghosts. I thought it was complete nonsense, made up only to scare others, garner attention, or profit. It didn't help that my family was extremely Christian, which dissuaded me from believing in anything supernatural. I am also extremely scientific in my mindset. If it's not concretely backed by science, I don't believe in it, for the most part. I'm now somewhat agnostic in the sense that I believe there is a creator or something greater than myself, which I call God, but I don't ascribe this God to any certain religion. I attribute my current beliefs largely to these two experiences. When I was 13, my family moved to a new house. The house was newly built in a new settlement, making it feel even stranger to me. There were inexplicable events, think lights flickering, the TV turning on by itself, cold spots, unmistakable footsteps, but the clearest sign I had ever heard came when I was 16. I was at home, sick from school. Nobody else was home. It was maybe 9 a.m. I woke up to the sound of a woman's voice. The voice said, "Hello? Hello?" As it woke me up, I thought I was just hearing things, or that perhaps the voices were lingering remnants of a dream. However, a few seconds later, I heard the voice again. It was absolutely, unmistakably a woman's voice. It wasn't very loud, but distinct, as if someone was speaking somewhat forcefully on the floor below me. I figured it was my grandmother, as she was known to use that exact sequence of words, but the tone and delayed onset sounded slightly different. I called back a couple of times. I didn't receive a response, so I got up and walked to the middle floor. I didn't see anyone, so I called out again. There was no response. I didn't hear or see the door open, nor the window, so I'm confident nobody left the house. I called out again, and like before, there was no response. I brushed it off and figured that if it was my grandmother, she would come find me. However, the house was quiet until the rest of my family came home. I asked if somebody had come by and was assured that nobody was home. The doors had been locked all day. I called my grandma, and she said she hadn't been over either. I brushed it off, thinking I must have heard something. A couple of weeks later, my dad was home alone late Friday night. The next morning, he said something to me along the lines of, "You know how you said this house is haunted? Last night I heard a woman's voice calling out, 'Hello.' I mean, it was obviously a woman's voice, there is no mistaking that." I hadn't told him about what I had heard, so I have a really difficult time believing that we both made up the same experience. The noise was unsettling, but I was able to brush it off until one night a couple of months later. At the time, I shared a room with my brother, who is a few years younger than me. It was maybe 2 a.m. when I woke up and saw him sitting on the bed. His face looked like he was in pain, and he was panicking, rocking back and forth while holding his eyes fixed on the door. I turned to him and asked what was wrong. He didn't respond. I asked again and this time received a response. However, he did not make eye contact with me and kept staring at the door. This was the conversation. "Me, what's wrong? Brother, the street." "Me, what?" No response. "Me, what is wrong? Brother, the street." "Me, the street?" No response. "Me, tell me what's wrong. Brother, the street." I start laughing nervously. "Me, what about the street? Brother, the street." I start laughing again. "Brother, yeah, that's really funny, alright." "Me, what?" He turns toward me, staring directly at me. "Brother, you're a goddamn idiot." He got up and left the room. My brother had really never cursed at me and never said goddamn. He also never sleepwalked, before or after this. He was gone for maybe 30 seconds before I worked up the courage to look outside since my window overlooked the street. On the street outside my house, I saw what looked like a hazy figure, almost as if the space it occupied was distorted, like the figure itself was blurry. It stood there for a while. I couldn't make out any eyes or defined features. It wasn't shaped like my brother, and I'm positive it wasn't him. I was terrified and rushed back to my bed. Naturally, I threw the blankets over my head and had to force myself to try to slow my breathing. I tried to convince myself that I was simply seeing things, but I could not shake the feeling. Eventually I calmed down until I heard the door open. Once again, terrified, I breathe a sigh of relief as I see my brother walk in, staring blankly at the wall behind his bed as he walks. Again, I continued to ask what was wrong, but he ignored my questions and almost immediately fell back asleep. I didn't end up sleeping for the rest of the night. When I woke up the next morning, I asked him about it. He didn't remember anything. I was incredibly unsettled, and I told my parents about what I had seen. They brushed it off, but I never did. More than 10 years later, I'm still much more open to the possibility of others' paranormal accounts. If anyone has any ideas about what happened, please let me know. We moved maybe 6 months later, unrelated to anything I experienced, and I never ended up having any other intense experiences afterward, although the more minor things, cold spots, sounds, etc., continued. Back in 2020, my wife and I had just welcomed our first baby. She was old enough to sleep in her crib alone in her room with the occasional midnight wake up for a bottle. On this night I woke up to her crying for her bottle. I got out of bed and went to her room, which was right across from ours. Still half asleep, and it was pitch black in her room. I shit you not, when I made it to her crib, I saw her lying in the middle with her blanket and empty bottle. Although it was pitch black, we follow this routine every night. In the corner of her crib, something moved. It caught my eye. At a quick glance in the dark, I could make out a ducking cat. I blinked and it was gone. I rubbed my eye to try to focus better on what I thought had moved, but the shape was now gone. But I kid you not, I saw a black and white cat. I had told myself, sleepless at night and in the dark, half asleep, that I was seeing things. I joked to my wife that we had a ghost cat. Didn't think anything about it. I'm allergic to cats, we don't have one, nor did we have a stray near our house. Never told anyone else about this incident. About a year later my mom came over and was talking to my wife as they walked through the house. We had a big German Shepherd inside the house occasionally. As my mom walked through the kitchen, in the corner of her eye she saw a dark figure lying on the ground. As she walked through the kitchen, she could see all the way down the hall. She could see all the way down the hall from the kitchen, including the few steps that were visible. She said in her mind she saw the figure and was like, "Oh, it's the dog," but wait, the dog was in the basement because the baby was out. She described a black and white cat lying on the floor in the hallway, which then got up and ran to the end, right where my baby's room was. So yeah, my house has a black and white cat that watches my daughter sleep. A shadow woman with creepy red eyes is staring into nothingness until she notices my presence. Hello. I've been telling this to everyone, but I myself was convinced it was just my imagination, but this truly happened the night of October 31st, 2015. It's my Lolo's, grandfather in Tagalog, birthday. I know it's cliché to say it's Halloween. But here in the Philippines, only the privileged are the ones who put up a costume and practice trick or treating. So what I've seen isn't some kind of prank. He's living alone, and I decided to visit him since my mom and dad can't because they're busy at work. Okay, let me describe his place. It's a house at the edge of the subdivision, and across from it, there's that creepy 5-story building abandoned on the other side. I used to live there when I was a kid and never in my life experienced anything paranormal, and even though I wished it would happen, I didn't know it would happen exactly that night. Here's what happened as I arrived at my Lolo's house. He was surprised why I'm there. It turns out that he forgot it's his birthday. He appreciated my visit, and we ate the dinner I cooked for him. So at around 9 p.m. I went to my favorite spot, which is the staircase with a window, to smoke some cigarettes. I told you it's my favorite spot, so I used to hang out there and never experience anything paranormal, but this night is different. As I am smoking, I noticed a black figure in the window on the 5th floor. I swear it looks like a shadow, and it's a woman. I'm having chills down my spine. She looks point blank depressed, staring into nothing with her creepy red eyes. I froze and watched her for about a minute. She appeared somewhat sad, but then she slowly turned her head towards me as if she were about to give a wicked smile. I'm so scared that she noticed my presence, and I know our eyes are going to meet, which I feel like I would be hypnotized by, and something bad is about to happen. So I looked away and ran as fast as I could to my Lolo upstairs like a terrified 5-year-old girl. I told him what happened. I told him about the shadow woman with its red eyes that's trying to make eye contact with me, and he immediately checked the window in the staircase, but it's gone. He saw nothing. He told me that maybe I am hallucinating, but I swear to God, I'm not. I'm trembling every time I think about what I witnessed. I decided to just spend my night there because I have never felt so paranoid in my life that I can't go home alone. My question is, how can someone be up there? It's abandoned. I know it's not human, it's pure shadow with just red eyes, and what is she looking at? I swear I could never erase her in my mind, and what if our eyes met? I feel like my soul would get sucked out of my body. It's been years since that incident, and I feel anxious every time I visit my Lolo. I have no courage to sit on that staircase again and have never dared to look back at the abandoned building. Paranormal stories from my grandma. My family has a bunch of paranormal stories about things that have happened to us, so I figured I'd make a mini-series. These are my grandma's stories. My grandma was a nun for about 5 or so years back in Europe. She's always been a very pious and spiritual woman. My grandma lived on a farm in a small village in Europe for most of her childhood. She was responsible for taking some animals to a field and watching them graze. It was a small and close-knit village with not too many strangers, so it was generally safe to let young children, 8+, take care of livestock on their own. One day when my grandma was about 9 or 10, she'd taken 2 goats to a small field that was maybe a 10-minute walk from her house. The animals were grazing peacefully, and she was sitting under a tree with some needlework when she noticed something white, and more importantly, fluffy, walk by her in her periphery. Being a child and a great lover of animals, especially the cute ones, she was immediately interested in anything white and fluffy. The fluffy thing appeared again, between some bushes a few paces away. She realized it was a lamb and immediately fell in love with it. My grandma has always had a soft spot for lambs, but her family had always been too poor to afford one. There was no one around, so she figured that maybe she'd try to befriend it and take it home for her family. So she put her needlework down and decided to follow it. The lamb was always a few meters ahead of her, constantly disappearing behind trees and bushes. Whenever my grandma caught up to it, it would disappear behind something again, only to pop up a few meters away. She was astounded at how fast the lamb was. Suddenly, she stopped and noticed 2 things. It had led her away from the field where her animals were, into a kind of wooded area that made her feel unsafe. It wasn't disappearing behind things, it was actually disappearing entirely. So, understandably freaked out, she ditched the animals and ran home. Her dad had to go get them and bring them home, because she refused to go back to that field. 2. When my grandma was about 15, her own grandmother fell horribly ill and moved into their house so that she could be looked after and cared for properly. After visiting a friend, my grandma was strolling home when she noticed a tall woman in a stunning black dress striding ahead of her. Her hair was pulled back, a black veil obscuring her face. She walked slowly and gracefully. My grandma says that she watched her for quite some time when she noticed that they were both walking to my grandma's house. The woman turned back to her and put a finger up to where her mouth would be, it was obscured by the veil, before walking forward and letting herself into the house. My grandma is from a big European family, so she assumed it was probably a well-off relative who had come to visit. A few minutes later, she walked inside to find that her grandmother had passed away minutes earlier. When she asked about their visitor, no one knew what she was talking about. 3. The house that my grandparents currently live next to is haunted. No one has lived in the house for more than 6 months in the past 30 years, so we all agree on this theory. As it turns out, my grandma knew exactly why. When she and my grandfather first moved into this house, 40 years ago, one of my grandma's friends moved in next door. Everything was fine for 10 years or so, but then her husband fell ill. My grandma spent quite some time over at their house, helping her care for her husband, cooking for them, and the like. One evening, around 11 p.m. or so, her husband's condition worsened. He was rushed to the hospital and passed away later that evening. His wife came over to our house, and she spent a few hours with my grandma before going home around 2 a.m., where she went to sleep soon after. She woke up a few hours later to the bedroom door opening. In walked her husband, apparently quite unaware that he was dead. He lay down on his side of the bed and went to sleep. My grandma's friend moved out a few weeks later, and since then no one stayed for more than 6 months. 4. My grandma passed away in 2012. She was a very stubborn woman, determined to get her way until the last. Our neighbors, not the haunted house, on the other side, have an ugly and possibly illegal tarpaulin on metal poles over their driveway, serving as a carport. My grandma has always hated it and said that she'd see it destroyed one day, even if it killed her. Fast forward to the day of her funeral. She was being cremated, and we had a small service in a church. It was just my mom, my uncle, my grandfather, myself, and my mom's best friend. The weather was awful that day, horribly cold and viciously windy, with a bit of rain, which wasn't surprising, considering that it was toward the end of winter. The weather lasted throughout the ceremony, but thankfully we couldn't hear much of it inside the church. She was taken to be cremated at 3 p.m., at which point the weather cleared up. The wind and rain and cold were gone, like they'd never happened. Instead, it was beautifully sunny outside, like a warm spring day. When we got to my grandpa's house, we discovered that the wind had ripped the tarpaulin off the metal poles. The tarpaulin itself had been ripped, rendering it useless. As soon as my neighbors threw the tarp away, The weather cleared up. They've never put up another tarp, but my family likes to joke about what would happen if they did. Encounter with something on Halloween. I know it sounds cliché, but this really did happen on Halloween. I don't remember my exact age, but I do remember that I was Charmeleon for Halloween that year. It was warm, as is typical in Houston, Texas, but I enjoy the heat, so it did not significantly bother me. Anyway, my dad had taken me trick-or-treating around our suburban neighborhood that night. We were passing between two homes with garages that faced out onto the street. They were corner homes. These houses were known for giving out the best candy and having the coolest costumes. I knew them as the scary houses. Being the wimp that I was, I kept my head down and tried to scurry past them, knowing that they wanted to scare me. When I had walked far enough, I turned around to see my dad laughing. "You can come back, sweetie. It's okay," he said. Everyone was looking at me. Then I noticed a guy standing behind my dad. He didn't have any skin, he was all muscle, dripping blood all over the concrete. It was Halloween, I thought it was a costume. Then he walked through my dad, like a ghost floating through a wall, as if he wasn't even there. My dad looked confused as he saw my face twist into pure horror. I quickly turned and ran as fast as my little legs could take me. In cliché fashion, I tripped as I was running. I shoveled my candy back into my bucket along with dirt and grass from a neighbor's yard because I was shoveling so fast. Then I got on my feet and bolted to my house. When I got home, I locked every single door and window and started crying. My poor father was still outside. I remember talking to my mom, and she calmed me down after that. She let my dad back in. When I mentioned it to him, he said he hadn't seen anything and looked genuinely concerned. I never saw the skinned man again, but it creeps me out to this day. My son claims to have seen the lady on the stairs in his room. I am a single mom of a soon-to-be 3-year-old boy. We live in a 2-bedroom basement apartment, and sometimes things feel off. A few months ago, I was awakened around 1 a.m. by loud banging in the storage room. Since the cat did not appear frightened, I assumed I was still asleep. 2 minutes after it stopped, my son came running in. A few weeks ago, my son stopped wanting to go to bed, complaining that there was a boo-boo in his room. I was watching ghost stories on my phone in my bedroom while he was watching television in a different room, so I just assumed that he overheard my story. He is a very smart child. I also allowed him to watch The Nightmare Before Christmas during Halloween, and he thoroughly enjoyed it. I probably should not have let him watch this and won't again until he is much older. I assumed at this that my child had an active imagination, as they do at this age, so I just put him back to bed and told him that there is no boo-boo. Until a couple nights ago, he stood at my bedroom door, and when I asked him to go back to bed, he started jumping up and down, as 2-year-olds do. Then he told me that the lady from the stairs was in his room and wanted to sleep in the bed with him. Is this something I should take seriously? He has not mentioned her since, and I don't bring her up, but he did mention boo-boo last night. I was holding him and sitting in his bed, and he pointed to the door, saying something about boo-boo. Is this just imagination, or should I do something? Halloween night. Okay, so this event happened a few years ago in my mother's apartment. Alone in the house. I don't know where everyone else was or where they had gone, and I was lying in bed. It was dark outside, so I wasn't sure what time of the night it was. I would say maybe 8 to 11. I was asleep, likely dreaming of a strange dream, similar to all my other dreams. For some reason part of me decided to wake up, and as I opened my eyes, something didn't feel right. Now I know about sleep paralysis. I've been through this many times. I can't move, I can't talk, and I'm not sure whether I am still asleep or awake. But this was entirely different. The atmosphere didn't feel right, it felt heavy. I heard something, but I wasn't sure what it was since I was just waking up, so I figured either my mother came home or I dropped something. As I was trying to move to sit up, I felt a sudden grip, a tight grip, like a predator catching its prey. Now I'm thinking it's paralysis, but then I felt a heavy frame over me like a body pressed against me, trying to hold me down. Suddenly there was a pain in my stomach like someone was putting their knee in my stomach to keep me pinned. More pressure was put into my stomach as I was trying to move, to toss to the side and curl up. The pain was in one spot, not all over, just a spot where a knee would be. Suddenly I'm hearing some breathing. I don't feel the air, but I can hear it. Then I felt a hand on my face. Like someone grabbed my jaw and slowly made my head turn to its side. I'm lying there moving my arm slowly but unable to fully function it. Then it happened. Whispers were heard in my ear, talking but at a rapid pace I couldn't catch up to. But I heard certain words being said. This time I felt actual breath in my ear. My body still felt heavy from whatever was on me, and my mobility was completely shot. All I could do was breathe and feel, and the pain was getting more intense. Within the whispers, all I heard were demands. It was like listening to a spirit box. You could only hear certain words coming out of all the noise you were hearing. I don't remember all the words, but they were pills, take, bathroom, and a few other words that were close to that category. I am unsure how long it lasted because I was trying to understand what was happening, who was involved, and why. I kept squirming on my bed as the whispering continued. Finally I felt the heaviness disappear off me, and I flung up to sit up with a heavy pant and held my stomach where I felt the pressure. I immediately rolled off the bed and looked at it, wondering what the hell just happened. The atmosphere was back to normal, there was no one else in the room, but something said, "Look." When I looked, my closet door was slightly opened. And if you had heard my previous accounts, you would read, "If not closed, things happen." It's one of the few I have that had witnesses. Not the flashiest event, but it's what happened. We were walking home late, me and my fiancée, from our respective works, sometime in autumn about 8 years ago? 10? Anyway, the way home went past this small field and through woods, well, barely woods, it was maybe a third of a mile through, if that. The way all the way to the woods was well lit with walkways, they were popular among joggers, but there wasn't anyone around that evening, it was too damned cold. Near where we were going to veer off the walk path to the woods, there was a splotch of dark on the ground. It looked like a shadow. Everything else was well lit. We looked up, and there was nothing above it / between it at streetlights that could have cast a shadow. We walked onto it, well, poked one foot in it, and waved our hands above it, and anything outside the splotch didn't get dark. Okay, so, not a shadow. Then we pulled a twig out of the patch of dark, thinking it was maybe paint that someone had spilled? Nope, the twig was a regular color when we lifted it up. It creeped us out, and we left, intending to come back and investigate the next day at daylight. But when we got back there, we couldn't find it again. A cool and strange sighting was witnessed by father and son. Greeley, Colorado. A strange creature sighting has a Colorado family worried there could be more of it to come. K. Brown, 73, was helping his son clean the attic Saturday when a strange happening allegedly took place. I had just climbed in the attic, my son was on top of the ladder in the garage watching me through the door when I saw a big thing moving around. At first I thought it was a big rat, but that was no rat, he told CN. The man claims a long, tall, dark figure moved in front of him as he stepped into the darkness. Yeah, it was dark, I know, but I had a flashlight with me. I heard a sound, similar to chattering teeth around me, and steps, they certainly sounded like human steps to me. As I point the light at it, I call my son to hurry and come in to see for himself, he said. When Brown's son purportedly rushed through the attic's door, he didn't know what to expect. I thought he was joking, explains the 42-year-old landscaper. I imagined he was playing with me, pulling my leg, you know? When I came inside and saw that figure standing there, I initially thought it was one of those Halloween dolls hanging up. I asked my dad to stop playing and help me clean the place, but that thing moved on its own. It was crawling like a baby, then it tried to stand up, and as it touched the ceiling, it ran through the wall and disappeared. We noticed a big hole on the wall that wasn't there before, but there is no exit to the outside. There is a portion of the wall that's shallow. The two men agreed the creature was about 7 feet long, thin, and with smooth dark skin. Well, I mean, it was crouched down, but we estimated it was about 7 feet long. I saw some sort of arms and hands, both very long, and the hands had tons of fingers and claws. It reminded me of that movie with the Mothman, the younger man said. When my dad pointed the light on its face, it started moving its mouth, which was tiny, with little teeth like a piranha, and ran away. I noticed the eyes were completely dark and had no pupil or anything. Pitch black, maybe because the light was hurting it. The creature reportedly emitted a high-pitched sound before fleeing. The men claimed they looked inside the hole, but there wasn't anything to be found in there. It was like a short tunnel that extended down the side of the house. I don't know any birds or raccoons that make tunnels like that on thick walls. We haven't heard anything there anymore, but we are concerned it had come back, said the homeowner. They say there wasn't any evidence left at the scene, such as food leftovers or droppings. Owls are usually misidentified and produce similar sounds. When I was maybe 5 years old, I had solidly outgrown my toddler bed and was in need of some place to sleep. So my father got an old bed frame at an auction. I don't know where the mattress came from, knowing him, it was the one that was on the bed wherever he got it. The first night, my mom read me a story and kissed me goodnight as usual. I didn't go to sleep immediately. The new bed was huge compared to my old one. I put my arms all the way out to the sides, and they were still on the bed. I put my feet down all the way and couldn't feel the bottom of the bed. I started to slide down under the covers, trying to find the bottom of the bed with my toes. Finally, my toes hit the bottom of the bed, and I pushed them out to touch the footboard. Something touched my feet. I pulled them back. But I was a sane and rational kid and assumed it had to be the blankets bunched up down there. So I put my feet back down. Again, it touched my feet. Then it moved. I started screaming bloody murder. My parents came in, checked the room, and, finding nothing, assured me it was either the blankets or, worst case scenario, a mouse. But from that night on, every time I put my feet down, something was there. At first, just all the way at the bottom. But then, it started to come closer. A quarter of the way up the bed, then half, then 3/4. Until I slept in any position other than curled up at the head of the bed, this thing was there. It grabbed my feet. It moved under the covers. Every time I lifted them, it would vanish. If I put my feet off the side of the bed, I could feel it brushing them. Occasionally it would grab my feet or ankles. Never pull, never leave a mark. I only vaguely remember those times since they were early on, and I soon stopped putting my feet off the bed and would jump from 3 feet away to get into it. But I know it had fingers and hands, but they didn't feel right. Not cold, just wrong. And it wasn't just me. The same thing happened to all of my friends. Sleepovers always ended up moving to the living room after they didn't heed my warnings about the foot of the bed. My parents were no help. After the first few times checking and finding nothing, they assured me it had to be my imagination and basically gave me instructions for how to deal with a panic attack. We moved, and I thought whatever it was would go away, but it didn't. One night one of my friends was sleeping over. We were probably 13 or so. She woke me up in the middle of the night, saying someone or something had grabbed her foot. I told her not to put her feet down at the bottom or off the sides and went back to sleep. Other friends just said they didn't like the bed, and I didn't push. I knew it sounded crazy to say something was grabbing their feet. Fast forward to when I was around 15. One day I thought, sleeping like this is stupid. I didn't know what was going on, but I'd had enough of it, so I put my feet all the way down to the end of the bed. Something touched them. I instinctively pulled them back. No. Just, no. By that time I was a young punk who broke horses for a living. I wasn't scared of anything, and this was not going to fly. So I stuck my feet down again. It touched me. I didn't move my feet. It moved slowly up, from my toes toward my ankle. Now I was confused. It felt like a hand, but made of cloth and with no bones. It felt like the hand of a cloth doll. What the hell was going on? I grabbed it between my feet. A little squishy, but again, like a doll. I started to pull it up toward the top of the bed. I don't know why I didn't just throw the covers off. I think I wanted to get a good hold of it first, but when I sat up to get my hands down there, it pulled away. I saw it zip back under the blanket and vanish between the mattress and footboard. There was no room for someone to be hiding in or under the bed. I lost it. At 3 a.m. I yanked the mattress and box spring off and dragged the frame into the old barn, where it sat for the next 20 years. Unfortunately, removing the bed didn't solve the problem. My closet light would come on, and the doors began to open on their own at night. They were the kind that slides accordion style but would pop off the track and open straight out like wings. My bed was positioned so I couldn't see into the closet with them like that. We tried to fix them again and again, but nothing worked. Even if we couldn't get them off, they popped out at night. The light was a mystery as well, as the switch was being turned and there didn't seem to be any wiring faults. Then one night, when the doors opened, I saw a shadow against the wall. Again, no. Screw this noise. I was probably 17, 18 at the time. I grabbed the toolbox and took the doors down. I emptied the closet. I took the shelves out. I moved my mattresses, I refused to sleep on a raised frame, into the closet. Nothing happened. Nothing happened the next night. After a few weeks I moved my mattresses back. I moved out when I was 20. One of my brothers took that room. A few years ago, I observed that he had retrieved the old bed frame from the barn and was using it. When I next visited a few weeks later, the frame was gone. He said every time he went to bed, something grabbed his feet. I'm not really somebody who believes in this stuff, but I genuinely think my dad's house is haunted. I'll try and keep it somewhat short. So my dad's basement is finished. When you walk down the stairs, you're looking at the back of the couch that's about 15 feet away. Between the stairway and couch on the left is a door to a storage room with the washer and dryer, and there's also a fridge and deep freezer to keep extra food and drinks. My dad is disabled from work injuries and rarely goes downstairs. It's almost always my stepmom because she's much more mobile. Anyways, on this particular evening I was downstairs sitting on the couch playing video games. My stepmom was out of town for a few days. I heard faint, slow footsteps coming down the stairs, and it sounded like how my dad would ease his way down them. I didn't think much of it. I just thought that he might be coming down to get something from the storage room. I then felt an intense presence behind me. When I was younger, my dad would often stop and watch me play video games for a minute when he came downstairs. So again, not thinking much of it, I said, "Hey Dad, what's up?" "Nothing." No reply. He's hard of hearing, so I got up and went in the storage room, assuming he had already walked away. The lights were off, and he wasn't in there. I went upstairs, and my dad was laid up on the couch watching TV. I asked him if he was downstairs, and he replied, "No." My dad is an old biker that worked construction his entire adult life. He has never been one to duck around. He's stone-faced and stoic almost 24/7. If a word comes out of his mouth, there's no questioning it. So I don't know what the hell it was. But of all the weird shit that's happened in that house, that's probably the one that gets to me the most. I had a strange storm drain encounter. Hello Internet, I recently had a strange encounter with something in a storm drain and would like to see if you guys could help identify what it was. What happened? Okay, so I work at a movie theater, which means we close the building down at about 1:30 to 2 a.m. So once the building was closed, a couple coworkers and I decided to go to a hill across town that had a view of Nashville. We hiked up the hill, and once we got to the halfway point, they headed back to the car to drive up the hill faster, and I continued up alone. When I got to the top, a guy was hiding in a bush and shouted, "What are you doing here?" at me and started to run after me. Now I know you are probably wondering where the creature comes in, and that is about to be revealed. So I ran down the opposite side of the hill towards a church and lost the guy tailing me. He went after my coworkers instead. As I reached the bottom of the hill, I found an open drainage pipe for the storm drains. It had bars covering the front at 1 foot 6 inches apart, and decided to hide down there. I made a couple of turns and ended up about 3 or 4 streets from where I went in. The drain was about 5 feet high, so I could move quickly with only a little bit of a hunch. I decided I was going to wait a little bit to make sure I was safe, so I took my phone out and started to scroll through social media. After about 15 minutes or so I heard what sounded like a rock getting kicked down the tunnel coming from deeper in, so I turned my phone flashlight on to investigate and saw a pair of eyes reflecting back just on the edge of the light. The eyes were about 6 inches from the top of the tunnel. The rest of its body was mostly in darkness, but I could tell it had a human shape. However, I wasn't sure if it was bending over like I was or if it was a shorter creature with a large head. We stared at each other for what felt like a minute, and it started moving quickly toward me again. Once it started moving, I took off back the way I came and ran to the church where my friends were waiting for me, and we left pretty quickly after that. I haven't been back to that hill since, but my coworkers and I are planning to all go down the drain together on Halloween just to see what happens. I'm sorry if that story was long or not allowed. I just figured the collective would probably have an idea what I saw in that tunnel. I grew up on a small island in the Pacific Northwest. As I still have several family members living there, I'm not quite comfortable with revealing much more than that, but I can say that the area is largely undeveloped in most areas. There are no large housing developments, apartment buildings, etc., and there are large gaps between homes. The area is accessible only by boat, with a ferry that stopped running at 8 p.m., and everything basically shut down at that point. The forest is quite thick with large old-growth trees, dense underbrush, etc. It's one of those places where, even at the peak of summer, you can still wander into pockets of cool, dense shadows that feel like they haven't ever been touched by warmth or sunlight. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in the forest, and I can say that I was never truly comfortable there. But it was familiar, and the unease was basically a low-level, constant thing that I learned to live with and ignore a lot of the time. I have a strong distaste for returning home now, and even spending a few hours there can leave me exhausted for the rest of the day. I almost always come home and nap for 3 to 4 hours or more. The island feels incredibly ancient, for lack of a better term. I was a very imaginative child going through a number of difficulties, so I've always questioned my sanity, for lack of a better word, but there are a few encounters that stand out in my mind and have bothered me for so long I feel like I just have to say something. I may share more later. There are 2 other main situations I want answers for, but one has stuck in my mind, and I thought this would be the right place to share it. I was about 9 when my family was going to the mainland for groceries. My mom was settling my younger brother in the car, and my younger sister and I were at war over the front seat. Mom asked me to close the gates to ensure that our dogs didn't escape while we were away. Our backyard has two gates, one that allows you to enter the yard from the side of the house, and another that goes from the yard to the small deer trail that leads from our house to a larger public trail. By public I mean you'd see maybe 1 to 2 other people on it max. These gates were basically right across from each other, separated only by the yard, which is medium-sized. Eager to renew the front seat battle, I rushed around the side of the house, my gaze fully focused on the first gate, from the side of the house into the yard, and slammed it closed. I'm not sure why I shut the first gate before checking the second, instead of going through it and closing it on my way back. Kids are weird, but I distinctly remember the click of the gate closing and the way the metal shook under my hand a bit. My head snapped up, senses screaming, and found something. There was a dark shape standing at the back gate, tall but not huge. My dad is 6 feet 4 inches, and I would say it seemed shorter than he was, though the yard does slope a bit. It appeared to be wearing an inky black cloak with the hood up, which rippled when it moved. I say wearing a cloak, but it didn't seem like something that was being worn but rather was a part of the thing itself. There were no visible face or limbs, and it was definitely not cloth. There were no folds, wrinkles, etc. It was as if it were completely made of moving shadow. Whatever it was had been posed like it had one hand on the back gate. Note, I couldn't see an actual hand or patch of shadow. It was just the posture, like it was leaning up against the gate as if preparing to open it, and was looking up towards the second story of the house, through the large back windows, very intently. I stared at it for a long second and felt enraged. This was unusual for me. I was a very sensitive and empathetic child, so sadness was familiar, but pure, unadulterated rage was a brand new feeling. It was like all this hate just came bubbling up inside of me. The thing seemed drawn by this reaction and quickly looked at me. It felt surprised? Startled? Confused? I definitely got the feeling that it hadn't realized I was there and was really surprised that I was glaring daggers at it. It hesitated a second, glanced back up at the windows, and then was gone. No fading, no movement, nothing. Just literally 1 second, it was there, the next, it wasn't. As soon as it was gone, I no longer felt mad, I just felt a bit shaky and sick to my stomach, more from my emotions getting all yanked around than from the thing itself making me sick. I hesitated, opened the gate, and ran for the back gate. It took me less than a minute, so if it had been a person and somehow just turned and left back down the deer path, I would effortlessly have been able to see it, but there was nothing there. I closed the back gate and hurried back to the car, where I quietly took the back seat, and we went to town as normal. I've read a few encounters with shadow beings before, and it seems like everyone has the feeling that either the being didn't really see them / notice them or was very malevolent, and it seems like most of the encounters are indoors late at night. This was fairly early morning. We always got up early for a day of shopping, the 10 a.m. ferry at the absolute latest, and it was bright and sunny, summertime, and outdoors. This thing definitely noticed me, and I was the one who felt very malevolent at that moment, not it. It almost seemed curious, maybe? If there was any emotion present, aside from surprise, it might have been a hint of sadness. However, that could be my projection as I reflect on the experience now. I would also like to mention that the event occurred at least a year before the release of the first Harry Potter movie. Additionally, although I was an avid reader, I became hooked on the series only after the first few books were published, and I had not yet read the third book. Therefore, this experience was not Dementor-like. I did know what the Grim Reaper was in a very general sense. My dad had gone as one for Halloween a year or two before this, but it wasn't very Reaper-like either and lacked the scythe. I should also note that, to our knowledge, there have been no deaths on our property, and we built the home ourselves about 2 years prior to this sighting. Additionally, due to the home's layout, I was out of sight from my mom and anyone else. Does anyone have any idea what it could be? Have you experienced something like this yourself? Thanks again for listening to this. Halloween night, sophomore year. This is my first time in this community. After listening, I decided I'd like to share my strange encounters. The first one happened on Halloween night at my parents' house in my sophomore year in high school. I don't know if it was just a coincidence that it happened to be Halloween or not, but it definitely added to the creepiness. I had gone to a party that night and had gotten home around midnight. I'd like to add that my parents built this house from the ground up when I was in first grade, so there were no previous residents, and never in my whole life had anything creepy or unexplained happen to me in that house, ever. Anyways, I got home, went to the bathroom to wash my face, and went to bed. Nothing seemed strange, all the doors in the hallway were closed, and my parents were asleep. I go into my room and close the door. I can't sleep with it open. I have no doubt in my mind that I closed it all the way. I wake up around 3 or 4 in the morning, and my door is open. This didn't seem too weird to me. I figured my mom had woken up to check if I had gotten home safely, but then I started hearing something, and being sleepy, I couldn't decipher it right away. I listened for a while and finally figured out it's a radio playing. I waited for it to turn off, thinking it was probably my mom's alarm going off. But it doesn't stop. I then realize it's not my mom's alarm but my shower radio playing across the hall. I get up really slowly and walk to just right outside my door and turn my lights on. I then look out into the hallway, and all the doors are open. The doors to the office, guest room, both hall closets, and bathroom are all open. That's when I get a little freaked out. I turn on the hall lights and wait quietly, listening to see if I can hear someone breathing or anything. Nothing. I go into my bathroom and turn off the radio. I decide to go back to bed without closing the doors in the hallway for fear of them opening again. I can get over the fact that my radio turned on. I don't get it, it's weird, but whatever. I close my door completely and hear the click as it shuts. I get in bed, and I am facing away from the door. I shit you not, almost immediately after I lay my head down, I hear my door open. I am now officially dying in my bed. I am frozen, I am not even breathing. I don't know what to do, I just lie there for what feels like forever, waiting for something to happen. I finally get courage, and I am able to sit up in my bed, and I am staring in the hallway. Nothing. I immediately get out of bed and turn on my light in the hall light as I am running into my parents' room. I wake up my mom and dad, but they are very sleepy, and I end up sleeping on their floor for the night. I explained everything to them in the morning, but they just brushed it off like it was nothing. I really don't understand what happened. It couldn't have been an intruder because all the doors were locked and we have an alarm system. It's been about 5 to 6 years since this happened, and I don't live in that house anymore, but thinking about it still gives me the heebie-jeebies. Oh, and nothing weird or strange happened in that house after that incident either. My encounter with what I now believe to be a shadow person. First of all, let me start by saying I'm so glad to have finally found somewhere I can share this, as it's still troubling to me to this day. My friend and I, she lived across the street from me, were celebrating her younger sister's birthday, whom we were all friends with. Her birthday was at the beginning of October, so she would always have a Halloween-themed party. This particular year, we thought it would be cool to have a haunted walkthrough through the woods in their backyard. Mind you, these woods aren't thick and lush with miles of trees. It was maybe 1/4 mile long, and there were houses on all ends of it. While their mother took the birthday girl out, the sister and I intended to surprise her with this walkthrough. We decorated the area and rehearsed the timing for when our friends and we would jump out and startle her. We live in Pennsylvania, so at this time of the year the sun starts to set pretty early, around 7 p.m. or so, which is when we decided to do the final practice run before Mom and the birthday girl came home and the rest of the friends arrived. My older sister was walking ahead of me towards a tree. She wasn't looking ahead, though, but rather towards me. All I remember is looking forward and seeing a tall, human-shaped black mass move in between two trees. At first I thought I was just seeing the wind project shadows, but when it started to move towards my friend, I knew it was most certainly not a shadow and not human. It happened so fast, all I remember is screaming, "Brandy, run." I knew she could tell by my reaction that I wasn't joking and this wasn't a part of our haunted walkthrough. We both ran back to the house. Once we got in, all of the other guests had arrived, including the birthday girl and her mom. They could tell by how exasperated we were that something was wrong. I told everyone what I saw to the best of my ability at the time. However, it was obvious only the older sister believed me because she saw the raw fear in my face when it happened. I have had several experiences, but the most disturbing one I will share is the following. About 14 years ago we, hubby, our 2 kids, and I, moved into an apartment downtown. It was a large house split into 3 apartments. We had most of the middle floor and all of the top floor. The kitchen, living room, and bathroom were on the middle floor, and the 2 bedrooms were on the top. When we moved in, we had many issues. New job for hubby, dealing with 2 toddlers, and me having cancer and then getting pregnant. So, lots to keep us busy. It was all little things at first. Things would be out of place, doors would be open, and lights would be on when you turned them off. When we noticed these occurrences, we both assumed that either the other person was responsible or that the kids were moving things around, as toddlers tend to be quite active. The odd noises might have come from either the other tenants or street noise. When we moved our oldest into the other bedroom, things ramped up a bit. He really didn't like being in there, but we figured it was because he was used to being in the room with us and was upset about moving. He's also special needs, I don't really want to go into what exactly, and I thought the strength of his reaction was tied into that in some way. He would cry and scream and would try to get out. I thought I was doing the right thing, and I would keep putting him back in there. I thought if I gave in, he would learn. If he hollered long enough, he could get his way. It got to the point I had to hold the door closed until he exhausted himself. He would wake up a few times during the night and wanted me to stay with him. Again, I thought I was doing the right thing and would go back to my room after a few minutes. A few times I didn't go at all when he cried for me. It was getting really frustrating, and it wasn't a freaking picnic for my little guy either. He was worn out and wasn't himself. I would try to pump up the fact he had his own room and his sister still had to share with us, but he didn't buy it. He didn't like the room. It took a while to get out why, because he wasn't very verbal, but I could piece together that he was scared of a man with no eyes and teeth. Then more stuff started happening around the apartment. I'd wake up during the night, and the TV would be off and the bedroom door would be open. I'd think hubby did it and go back to sleep. Meanwhile, the same was happening to him, and he thought it was me. The kitchen cupboards would be open most mornings, and my cooking ladles were usually on the other side of the stove. The toilet would flush randomly, or the taps would turn on. A few times I heard my husband call my name, but he was either not home or said he didn't call for me. A few times the kids' toys moved or turned on by themselves. One night I went downstairs to use the bathroom, and my daughter's fire truck fell out of the toy box and rolled out into the hall with the lights and sirens going. It was the fastest I've ever used the bathroom. At this point we had been living there about 18 months, and nothing really major had happened, but all the little things were getting on our nerves. We both suspected there might be ghosts, although we weren't openly discussing it. Then I saw him. My boy was having another rough night. At this point I was 7 months pregnant, and I was just not having it tonight. I asked my husband to come into the room with him so I could go to the bathroom. Quick layout of the upstairs. The stairs were at the far end of the kitchen and went up about 10 steps, then a landing, another set of 8 or so steps, and then a short hallway with the bedroom doors across from one another. There were 3 overhead lights, all 100-watt bulbs. I opened the bedroom door and stepped into the hall. Standing there on the landing was a man. He was around my husband's height, 5'11", and was wearing a black suit. He didn't have any eyes. I don't mean he had empty sockets, the skin was unbroken, like he had never had any eyes. His mouth. Holy jeez. It was a regular-sized mouth, but it wasn't. It almost looked like shark teeth, but not quite. The light was the worst. The hallway was illuminated, but directly around him, it felt like the light was almost sinking or draining into him. The light wasn't white either. It was an orange, piss yellow kind of light. I just stood there staring at him, and I felt like he was staring at me. Like he had been just waiting for this. I was so scared I was almost beyond feeling it. I walked backwards into the bedroom and started closing the door. My husband asked what was wrong, and I turned to him without a clue about what to say. He looked past me, and his eyes widened. The doorknob was pulled out of my fingers, and then the door slammed. He said he saw a shadow go by the door, and then he started sweating. He was sweating so much it looked like he was in a shower. He said he felt like he should go out into the hall but was scared too. We had to, though. Our daughter was in the other bedroom, and I didn't want to stay in that room a second longer. He grabbed up our boy, and we just ran the few steps across the hall into our bedroom. I ended up pissing in the wastebasket for the rest of the night, and we moved out within the week. A few years later I was training a new guy at work, and we got to talking about ghosts. I told him this story, and at the end he asked where it was. I told him, and he freaked. His friend was renting the same apartment, and he had been staying there off and on. Most of the same stuff was happening, but they didn't see the man. He didn't like the bedroom my son had. He said he always felt like panicking in there. I still feel horrible about making my son stay in that room. Who knows what happened or what could have happened. I feel like it was enjoying the misery, and I hate that I put my son through that. I never thought it was a ghost/evil blind shark man. It's never an automatic choice that your kid is acting up over the paranormal, but I still feel like shit over it. The house is no longer standing. It burnt down 3 or 4 years ago. I don't even like going by the empty lot. Like it might follow me or something. It was the scariest thing I have ever experienced, and short of someone dying in front of me, it always will be. When I was about 9 or 10, I used to have to lie on the floor to sleep. I'm not sure why I did it, I just found it more comfortable for a while, some weird phase. Nevertheless, I was in my bed, having wrapped myself entirely in blankets and sheets, with my pillows arranged nearby, and I had then settled onto the floor to prepare for the night. I remember rolling over to push away a toy or something near me so I had space to sleep, and in that exact moment a hand came through my floor. It looked as if someone had set its opacity in Photoshop to about 65%, and it was definitely human. It reached for me as if in a grabbing motion. However, I don't think it could grab me, because it went straight through my arm, it just passed through it. My body went numb. I'm not sure if it was from it touching me or if it was due to fear, but I didn't think about it, I just ran. I spent the rest of the night in my mom's room. Another story is when I had a birthday party in the same house. I was a little older then, maybe 11 or 12, and I had invited 5 or 6 of my best friends over. We got bored with whatever we were all doing, and I suggested we go ghost hunting, since I had told my friends about the things that went on in my house, strange noises, that feeling of knowing someone is there, the hand. Being kids, they all loved the idea, and we started roaming my house with our hands posed into finger guns, pointing and shooting. It was just a fun game. Then, in my living room, I pointed at a random spot near the TV and yelled, "Bang!" There was a loud thump, like something big had been dropped on the floor near where I pointed, and a touch-activated toy near the spot went off, like in the movies. I remember my face going flush, turning around, and realizing everyone else's faces were flush too. We all ran out to the porch and all silently exchanged the "you heard/saw that too?" face. Bonus story, on the night my first cat, Spot, died, due to complications with dental work at the vet's, I was sitting on the edge of my bed crying. I was about 9 or 10 around this time, while facing out the door of my room. With teary eyes, I saw in the den what I thought was Spot, who had died that day, and being a kid in the state of denying his first death experience, I called him over. Spot came over to me like he always did, his tail perked up. I patted a spot on my bed and called to him. Spot crouched at my feet, ready to jump, and as he sprang up, his body began to evaporate, and the second his paw hit the sheets, he had completely vanished. I also just wanted to add that I no longer live in that apartment building. We moved out when I was 15. And episodes like these were very rare, but there was an ever-present feeling of being watched, like breathing on the back of your neck. And whenever I was home alone, I was always overcome with this feeling of dread. Sometimes things would be rearranged in the mornings, like when I used to pose my bionicles. Sometimes they'd all be posed differently. Since moving out, I've never had any more paranormal experiences. My Halloween horror story. I live in a small town in Indiana. I'm male and was 14 at the time of this story. Ever since I grew out of trick-or-treating, I have discovered a new Halloween pastime. Every year I go to my grandparents' neighborhood to get candy from all the rich old folks. But while my little siblings go to get some sweet treats, I do something a little different. Every year I dress up in a bush suit and hide in my grandparents' hedges. After the kids go ring the bell and get their candy, I jump out and scare them. It's mostly a good bit of fun, at least ever since last year. The night was going great, and I had been having a very successful evening. Most of the younger kids had gone home, and it was mostly teenagers. Just the way I like it, I thought. With teenagers I don't need to hold back and can really give them a scare. My last trick-or-treater of the night was just one guy in a very convincing Michael Myers costume. He had the overalls, knife, and everything. I jumped out of the bushes and did my thing, but unlike the other trick-or-treaters who screamed or laughed, he just stared at me dead in the eyes. Now I'm a big guy, and this guy wasn't as muscular as me, but he was taller. After about 20 or 30 seconds I tell him it's time for him to move on. Instead of reacting, he tackled me to the ground and raised his butcher knife. I was able to kick him off and roll away. He missed his strike and plunged the knife meant for me in the ground. This pretty much proved that his prop knife wasn't a prop at all. That struck the fear of God in me, and I just ran down the street. I didn't want to lead this psycho back to my grandparents' house, so I ran down the pretty much empty streets. I looked behind me, and he was right on my tail. As I rounded a corner, I remembered I was wearing my bush suit and thought of a last-ditch escape. I kid you not, as round the corner of the street I dive into a bush in someone's yard, and I just begin to pray. He ran past me in the bush, and I thanked the Lord above he didn't see me. I got back to my grandparents' house and called the police, but because there were no witnesses and Halloween is very busy for police, they couldn't do anything about it. I don't know if he was high or just crazy, but I just hope we don't meet again. Unexplainable Halloween night for me and my siblings. It all happened about 13 years ago. I was about 14 years old, and I will always remember that late evening. A bit of context first. We are 8 siblings, 4 girls, 4 boys, raised only by mom. Dad walked out on us a few years prior to the event I am about to tell. We grew up quite modestly. Mom was the only breadwinner. We didn't have a lot, and we were living in a rental that was just a bathroom, a small hallway, a living room that doubled as a bedroom for the girls and mom, and a kitchen that also doubled as a bedroom for the boys. Anyway, we were a content Christian family. It was October 31st, and only 7 of us were home. My oldest sister was out, and Mom was at work. Being the second one, I was in charge. It was about 7 p.m., and we were all in the living room minding our business. Some of us were playing with some toys, I was painting, a few were watching TV, and it was quite peaceful, just waiting for Mom to come home. Suddenly my younger brother said, "Hey guys, do you hear that?" We turned the TV volume down and listened. From across the hallway that connected the two main rooms, we could all clearly hear a repetitive, high-pitched banging. It was just like someone was repeatedly hitting a spoon on a cup. We all stood frozen. It went on for a few minutes, and then we stopped. All bundled up together, we slowly crept our way to the kitchen. On the table, there was something, like bread, butter, and a jar with a spoon in it. We just ate, and we didn't put stuff away. We got close and tried to mix the jam with the spoon, and surely enough, it was the same sound. At this point we didn't know what the deal was, and we were really creeped out. Nothing like the wind or other external forces could have produced the sound we heard. It was very deliberate, and it went on for a few minutes, so it wasn't just a spoon falling off or something like that. We put the things away, and we went back to the living room. That is when the horror really started. I kid you not, around the whole house, there were unexplainable bangings. We could hear footsteps in the hallway, above us from the attic, and around us from the walls. We all started crying and got in a bed, all bundled up, praying. It all went like this for a few minutes, and suddenly, we heard the house door open. It was Mom, she just came back from work. And it all stopped. Needless to say, we all jumped on her, hugging her and crying. We told her what happened, and she was shocked. We never had an experience like that, and when we come together, we sometimes talk about it. It was one of the scariest things that ever happened to us. We all heard the same things. We didn't see anything, but the sounds were real. We think it might have been something like a demonic attack that wanted to create fear in us on one of the darkest nights of the year. Did any of you ever experience something like this? I found an army of ghost warriors in Hawaii named Nightmares when I was solo hiking and checking out some old hidden ruins. I had just arrived in Hawaii less than 24 hours prior and had never heard of them before. I went solo hiking at Lulumahu Falls and heard there were some old ruins and another waterfall nearby, so I stopped to see if I could find them. I worked my way to the ruins. About a minute after turning off my camera, I heard a bunch of drums in the distance and some singing/chanting in a language I didn't understand and some voices saying my name. It was Oahu. I figured it was a luau tourist group. It was getting louder and louder, and I was getting pissed from the noise. I saw a guy on the other side of the ruins near the trees, super buff, with barely any clothes on, with a red feather cape, completely white eyes, holding a torch and spear, with a bunch of shadowy silhouettes behind him in a long line. I thought they were cosplayers. I turned my face away, looking at him through the side eye, taking glances at him. He had no foot. I thought he was disabled. I assumed his other foot was hidden behind grass. All of a sudden an extremely disgusting smell happened right in back of me, reminding me of roadkill. I turned around to see where it was coming from but saw nothing. Then the drums got even louder, like they were right there in back of me. I turned around and saw that the guy was gone. I walked towards where the drums were, listening to see where they were coming from. I assumed hidden speakers. Look at the ground, no dig marks. Then I tracked the sound to its source. It was coming from the middle of thin air. 4 or 5 feet off the ground. I began hyperventilating and took a few steps back, far away from the drum sound. I thought I was hallucinating. I was covering my face with my hands and trying to gather my thoughts and relax my mind. Next thing I knew, my forehead experienced one of the worst pains I ever felt in my life. A sharp searing pain. I was 100% certain a seizure was going to come. I tried to relax my mind. Next thing I knew, I was overcome with the feeling of acceptance and peace and the feeling I would not die. For a while I continued covering my face, just trying to maintain a calm mind so I would not have a seizure. The whole time my head was in excruciating pain. There were loud drums banging, feet stomping, and people singing many songs that included the word ka. My body felt like it wanted to kneel at one point. During that time, I experienced a variety of unusual sensations and feelings I prefer not to discuss, along with significant pain in my head. Eventually, the drums and pain ceased, followed by an extremely loud horn or conch sound that blasted. I had to cover my ears. I assumed it was some sort of security alert nearby. I saw 2 light orb things in the distance. I looked at the ruins, paid my respects to King Kamehameha, and left fast. Later on at a group hike at Mount Olamana, I learned that the stuff I bumped into were nightmares and that the area I was in was one of the most haunted areas in Oahu. I should not have gone there. This story was my mother's but stays with me deep in my subconscious. She was in her preteen years living in our family's home in Riverton, Utah. This house had many supernatural occurrences throughout the years until my grandmother supposedly used the power of Christ to purify the house. Anyways, my mother had been lying in bed one night nodding off over a book when a loud growl shook her awake. Literally shook her awake. The growl was deeper than any she'd heard in real life or on TV and directly under her bed. The sound made her freeze in place and cry silently for several minutes until the growling turned to periodic barks equally deep and demonic. The barking made her scream out for her parents in the next room, but it seemed she didn't need to, as they had opened her door at practically the same time she had screamed. As soon as the door opened, all sound in the house stopped, and no one said a word. My grandparents searched under my mother's bed with a flashlight, saying there was nothing there, but later in my mother's life they told her the truth. When they shined the flashlight under the bed, they couldn't see anything. Not the back wall behind the bed, not the underside of the box spring. It was as if the beam of the flashlight disappeared into a black void under the bed. It wasn't a week before Grandma started screaming through every room, "In the name of Jesus Christ, leave this house." Anyways, that's the only under the bed story I've ever known. The whistling ghost. I began living with my boyfriend when I was a teenager. He was older than me and had his stuff together, a good job, his own house, in his very early 20s. My home life with my parents wasn't very good, pretty miserable, actually, so I found myself at my boyfriend's house often until it became pretty permanent for about 3 years. Within these 3 years is when I had experiences with another roommate who made my life at my boyfriend's house an interesting one, to say the least. My boyfriend worked 12-hour shifts during the week, which left me home by myself all night. I'm also a night owl myself, so most nights, especially when I was no longer in school, I'd stay up passing the time until he came home. I remember the very first night I spent the night alone there. I was in the master bedroom changing clothes to get comfortable for the night. While changing, I had a strange sensation that someone was watching me. It was strong enough that I had even looked through the windows to see if somehow someone was peeping in on me. I was the only one home, and I didn't see anyone outside. I shrugged it off. I was the type that wasn't even sure if I believed in ghosts, which was silly because I even had previous experiences a few years prior. At that time, I didn't even consider that the creepy sensation I was feeling could be anything supernatural. There was something seriously wrong with the bathtub. In the early days of living in the house, I'd soak in the tub and feel the same prickly eyes boring into me. I also started to notice a thick, black grout that would form at seemingly rapid paces. No matter how often I'd scrub it clean, it would be back in a matter of days. In all the places I've lived, I've never seen such thick, black scum as that. It was really disgusting. I remember having to spend many days and nights scrubbing that thing. I stopped the pleasure of taking baths pretty early on. Imagining the thought of lying naked with wide, greedy eyes staring at me in the past filth of utter decay deterred me from that. I took 2 quick as possible showers instead. I'm not sure when I began to notice, but I would hear this faint whistling sound. I can still remember the tune of it. It would build up all night until the morning hours, and then it would get even louder. Most of the time it could not even be heard because it was so faint, you had to be alone there to really notice it. We would experience electrical problems constantly. TVs going out or changing the channel by themselves. Once I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling fan in the master bedroom that hadn't worked in months until, all of a sudden, the fan and the light came on the fan at full blast. It scared me so badly that I jumped up and ran out of that room and could not go back in there for days. The whistler loved to play pranks on me. Especially while I was cleaning. One of the guest rooms was the center of most of the pranks. I had just finished cleaning that room, spotless. After I had just finished vacuuming and briefly took the vacuum into the living room for about 5 minutes, I returned to find a string tied to the ceiling fan pull switch, with a plastic Halloween-type ring hanging from it. Another time a similar thing occurred, but it was actually a diamond ring I had found right in the middle of the floor right where I had just finished vacuuming. I've asked friends who've stayed in that room if they had lost any rings, but no one ever claimed them. The by far scariest thing that happened to me was actually when I wasn't even home alone. It was a weekend night, and my boyfriend and a few of his friends were over. They were dozing off in the living room, watching TV, when I decided to go pluck my eyebrows. So, I was in the middle of plucking, and all of a sudden I started to feel those eyes again. I tried to ignore it and continued plucking. By this time I was more fed up with this ghost and was trying to stay adamant against letting it control me, so that's why I just kept right on plucking. Then suddenly, I felt this chill against my ear, and a low voice of a man said, "Hey!" directly in my right ear. I was beyond terrified, and I ran into the living room and jumped right into my boyfriend's lap and cried. That incident had me scared for months, and it still scares me when I think about it. The pinnacle moment was when it became not just me to experience this stuff. I found out later that my boyfriend purposely tried to keep the details of the hauntings away from me, and things came out in the open. My boyfriend, our friends, and I were partying and playing a few drinking games. Suddenly our friend Tommy came out of the bathroom with his face as white as a sheet. I asked him if he was okay because I thought he had gotten sick. He said, "I was in the bathroom taking a piss when I started hearing whistling behind the shower curtain. I thought it was Joe or someone playing a prank on me, so I pulled back the curtains, and no one was there." Everyone at the party thought that someone outside was playing a joke after hearing this. There's a window in the bathroom above the bathtub, so Joe took it upon himself. He had just gotten out of boot camp for the army, and he was a pretty tough dude, to go outside and investigate. He came back inside to relate to us what had happened. He was incredulous and beside himself as he explained that he walked around the side of the house where the bathroom is located when someone touched his shoulder and shouted, "Hey!" So he turned around, swinging his arms, but found no one there. The party diminished quickly after. I didn't tell either of them my experiences. I thought I'd tell them at a later time when there wouldn't be as many people around. I later discovered, long after we had broken up, that my boyfriend had kept a secret. He knowingly bought the house at a lower price because someone had died there. A man had died under suspicious circumstances in the bathtub. So that's my story, and it's 100% true. 4 people claim to have seen a huge black Bigfoot along Alabama State Route 22 in the Tallapoosa County area. The sightings, documented by Bigfoot researcher Jim Smith, took place within a 4-mile radius around mile marker 135. Big Joe was spotted twice within about a 4-week time, said Smith, 58, and founder of the Alabama Bigfoot Society. The investigator said a woman who was driving on Halloween night last year was the first to report seeing the creature. "There is a hunting trail that goes into the woods," he said. When they came upon the curve, they looked out to the woods and saw the black Bigfoot walking down through the woods. And when Smith went to the area to investigate the report about a month later, he became a second witness. "It was around Thanksgiving week when I first saw him. When I came around the curve, that's when I saw him. He wasn't that far from the road, but he was walking down through the woods. He was very muscular, he was enormous, he was very wide, and he was also black," he said about the animal. Another man, who was reportedly traveling east on the same highway, said it was almost dark when he came across the creature. Smith said he got within approximately 70 to 80 yards of the sign. The sign is reflective, like all road signs are, and he said that when his lights hit it, he could see this Bigfoot, a very tall Bigfoot. The man claimed that as he approached the beast, it strode across the road and that it took only 3 steps to cross it before vanishing into the woods. "It takes about 9 steps to cross this road," Smith said. The man described the alleged Sasquatch as having flowing hair on its neck and head. The height of the Bigfoot. "We took a ruler and we measured. The Bigfoot's head was on this yellow sign, so we measured that, and it would have made this particular Bigfoot, who I believe was also Big Joe, about 9 feet tall." An additional witness said it was Christmas Eve of the same year and that he and his family were driving west when they saw the large black Bigfoot walking through a patch of woods in the foggy afternoon. It is not the first time that Smith has had an encounter with this creature. He claims to have seen it many times throughout the years. The founder of the Alabaman Research Organization is a no-kill Sasquatch advocate aiming to protect the purported creature's habitat. Only, when this first sighting occurred in Alabama, I didn't know what a Bigfoot was. In those days we called it a giant monkey, he told Cryptozoology News. "I don't intend to kill or try to kill one," he says. "I know this feeling comes from my Indian blood. I know it exists, and I don't need a body to prove it." They believe Bigfoot is another human species or a cross between a human and something else. Reports of drivers spotting the creature on busy roads are not unusual. Many of these types of sightings end up being animal misidentifications. We had a visitor on Halloween. I live in an old, tiny, 3-bedroom house in an indigenous community/reservation. After my parents gave me this old house, I asked my fiancé and his stepbrother to move in to help with costs. Fiancé and SB, without fail, every day to my annoyance, would lock the doors and windows to the house. Every single one was locked. Since the house's construction in the early 1960s, my family has resided there, and we have never locked the back door. Eventually, I adapted and started locking windows and doors before bed as part of our household bedtime routine. We became a small family, with our 2 fat cats and a round husky puppy. Halloween rolls around. It was uneventful. We handed out candy. Watched movies. We all had work the next day, so after doing the window/door check, fiancé and I go to our room with the puppy, and SB goes to his room with the cats. Everything is completely normal and within routine. The puppy was 6 months old and huge. He'd always sleep beside our bed on the floor. In the middle of the night, around 3 a.m. to be specific, puppy starts crying. Fiancé woke up first, since that was his side of the bed, and got up to take the puppy for a pee. They come back in, but puppy keeps crying. And these aren't soft little doggo whimpers. They were getting louder and more panicked as the time went on. So I get up and offer to take puppy out again. Fiancé grumpily says no, and puppy stops whining and runs off to the living room. We could hear him hop on the old sofa, and with the house falling quiet again, we drifted back off to sleep. 20 minutes later, the sounds of our puppy's screaming woke us up. Screaming. It literally sounded like someone was teasing the crap out of puppy. Fiancé and SB both ran into the living room and found puppy hiding underneath our coffee table, cowering and screaming as if someone was whipping him. The guys do their door/window check, everything is good. They put away their late-night weapons of choice. Well, over coffee the next day at breakfast, we begin discussing what had happened. SB tells us he woke up shortly before we did and had heard when puppy was starting to whine. He woke up because he heard someone stomping through the house. He implied our arguing had woken him up and that fiancé's stomping and slamming stuff was not cool and likely why the puppy was freaked out. We gave him a weird look and explained we weren't even awake at that time, and after some questioning, he said it sounded like someone was wearing work boots and digging around in the kitchen. This story takes when I was 15/16. My sisters decided to go visit my uncle while he was working on some of the framing of our new house, which was something that wasn't all that uncommon for us. We lived on the same block where our house was being built, and you could actually see it from the front yard of our current house. At this point, though, the house was just the wood framing with that heavy plastic that's actually pretty hard to see through all around it. Anyways, they were talking with my uncle in the garage of the new house, which was all the way in the back of the house, when they heard my dad start yelling and screaming horrible things. They could hear him yelling about how he was going to hurt himself and put himself down permanently. Of course they all went running in the direction where they heard him yelling to stop him, which was in the master bedroom towards the front of the house. When they got there nobody was there, they looked everywhere and couldn't find my dad. My two sisters and my uncle later decided not to repeat that story, thinking maybe it was a fluke. I never heard this story until this next story, which happened almost a whole 2 years later. At this point we had finally moved into our new house. It was amazing, honestly. My family of 8 finally fit comfortably within a home and no longer felt crowded. We even had room for guests to come over and still not be squished together. So one night, my sisters decided to invite over our cousin we got along with at the time. That same night my parents decided they wanted to go coyote hunting and left me in charge of all the kids. Being the oldest, I was quite used to being left in charge of the younger kids at any time of the day or night and for long periods of time, so this wasn't new for any of us. I personally preferred nights when I was left in charge. For me it was easier. All I had to do was ensure that everyone was fed and clean and that the younger kids were sleeping by a decent time. On this particular night I decided to have the younger kids go to sleep earlyish so that us older kids could watch movies and snack on the things our cousin had brought over without interruption. So we older kids decided to hang out in my sister's room, which was the second closest bedroom to the garage, with my room being the closest. As we were all hanging out and laughing with each other, we heard my dad yell that they were home from the garage. We all looked at each other really confused because they hadn't left all that long ago, and it was pretty early for them to be back so soon from coyote hunting. The other kids asked me if we should go greet them in the garage, but I felt a little funny about it, but of course I wasn't going to say that. Instead I told them to let them take their time coming in, that they probably wanted to smoke before coming in, and that they'd have to walk past the room we were in to get to their room anyways and we'd say hi then. They all agreed, and we went on visiting. After 15 to 20 minutes, we realized that they never came in, which was really odd. The kids asked me at this point if we should go look in the garage, but I still had that really weird feeling, so I told them no and went and locked the door that went to the garage instead. I then went to look out our side window, where you could see the driveway and part of where we park the cars that don't go in the garage. While looking, I see that their car doesn't appear to be here, but what's more disturbing to me is the fact that there are no fresh tire tracks in the fresh snow, meaning that they were never here. At this point I can't really hide my panic and ask the kids to go shut and lock the younger kids' rooms where they were sleeping and then lock themselves into a room as well. I then decide to call my parents and explain what we heard and ask them if maybe they came back and left without saying anything. They tell me they never came back and rush home. My dad then does a sweep around the house with his shotgun and checks the garage, but there is nothing that even suggests someone was there that night. My parents and I decide maybe we heard the TV and scared ourselves, and we all return to our rooms to go to sleep. After that night, Whatever was in our house started taking a particular interest in me for some reason. Almost every night I'd hear things getting thrown in the attic above my head while I was trying to sleep or something walking. Some nights it decided that wasn't enough, and not only would I hear somebody walking in the attic but also something being dragged behind it. This was an every night occurrence, and no matter how many times I tried to tell somebody about it, nobody believed me, especially not my parents. That is, until it started happening to my sisters in the next room over. They also started hearing the noises in the attic, and not too long after, my mom did too. It got to a point where we all had heard it, except for my dad. Once we all heard it, that's when I think it started watching me even during the day. I'd be in the kitchen alone cooking and suddenly feel like there was somebody behind me just glaring at me. I'd feel frozen and feel prickly as it would look me up and down, like I could feel where its eyes were at almost. Then I'd turn around, and there was nobody there. All of this made everyday life inconvenient, but we would sage and put out spirit plates. Just an FYI, we are enrolled Native Americans that live on the res, and hope for the best. Then one night I decide to take a shower late at night. This is something that I didn't do often at the time, as I was more of a shower in the morning kind of person. However, that night I did, and I got out of the shower and went to my room to get dressed. As I was getting ready for bed, I started hearing the noises in the attic again, but in a much faster paced motion than I had ever heard before. Instead of walking, it was running back and forth and dragging something behind it. Then from the corner of my room I heard what sounded like a little girl laughing. I stopped, obviously, and just stared at that corner for a long time before continuing to get ready for bed. In my culture we had been taught the more fear you show these things, the more control they have, so I tried my hardest to not be scared and crawled into my bed to go to sleep for the night. Things were pretty stagnant after that, with nothing progressing beyond the sounds in the attic or the feeling of being watched. But then late spring hit, and without the rest of us knowing, my second to youngest sister started having dreams. Well, nightmares, to be more exact, but dreams nonetheless. In her dreams she was playing with a ball, and the ball rolled towards the edge of the woods. She then would go to retrieve the ball and a shadowy man figure wearing a tall top hat. He then tells her she needs to start a fire within the house or he'd hurt the whole family. She has this dream almost every night until eventually she gets so scared she does it. Fortunately the house and everyone inside were fine, but this finally is the straw on the camel's back. We eventually got into contact with a family friend who gave us advice on how to get rid of whatever this thing was, and it did go away. But that thing, whatever it may be, was the scariest damn thing I've ever dealt with, and I truly hope I never have to deal with it again. I've seen things since and seen things before that, but that thing was the only one that's truly ever stuck with me and made me stop looking for the scary things in the dark. Demonic encounter? Hi, I wanted to come onto this platform to share my story to get multiple views or similar experiences from my own experience so I can hopefully get an answer. 2 nights ago on the 6th of September, I experienced a rare encounter that left me seeking advice or professional facts. This all started at around 9 p.m. I and 2 other women had just eaten and wanted to walk in the park, which was busy at this time in the city. We parked our car near the right side of the park where there are parking spots, and it was quite dark and secluded, even though there is a crowded outside sitting area. After we got out of the car, we walked towards the park's pavement. A woman with a small white dog on a leash approached us from behind as we walked in front. She asked for money to buy French fries. I quote, she said, "Lady, can you please give me $2 to buy fries because you look so pretty and elegant?" Usually, I wouldn't think twice before helping those in need, yet she was well dressed, with freshly done nails and toes, and a designer bag on. I forgot to mention, she had come out of the bushes near where we parked the car, so we were a bit freaked out. We told her we'd think about it and walked away. We believed she might be mentally ill and could have hurt us while we were trying to console each other. She stood behind us and waited until we went forward. She then went the opposite way. We took a normal stroll, still shaken up from that experience, and justified her actions as ill behavior. We then got thirsty and tried to forget what just happened, so we walked across the road from the park to the small cafe outside. Bear in mind there were so many people outside still at around 9:45. We were there for about 4 minutes before we saw the same lady cross the road to exactly where we were. She approached us again and asked for the same thing, money. The other females weren't responding. They turned around, and I felt bad, so I said, "Sorry, lady, I don't have money to give right now." An eerie feeling roamed my body, I was shaking as I spoke. She then went on to call us rude and mean, and her dog started barking uncontrollably. Her face was pale like a ghost, and her eyes went from the ocean color of blue to the darkest brown, almost black. Her nails were painted black, matching the color of her hair. Her smile widened as she stood in her exact spot, tilting her head and watching us from a very short distance, staring into my eyes, hers empty with no emotion but the smile on her face. Her dog's barking filled my ears, making them ring. After what felt like a lifetime, she walked away. Her dress flowed in the street, yet there was no wind. People around us started questioning who she was. I was shaken up, scared, and terrified. Who could this woman be? Why would she only ask us and no one else? She never spoke to other people. Why choose us? These questions bother me every day. I couldn't stop contemplating it afterwards. Immediately we went back to the car, got inside, and went home. There was a chapel nearby with a cemetery not far from it. I assumed she went there, as she left in that direction. My mind was filled with questions, seeking answers. Could she have been waiting for us by our car, as she knew where it was? We made it to the car, still scared, as it was not a well-lit area. Children were still playing in the park play area with their parents. Could they be in danger? Ever since then, I've noticed things happening and changing. I experience emotional outbursts, anxiety, and sleepless nights, as I still see her eyes every time I close mine. Yesterday I bumped my car into stairs that I never saw, and it cost me repairs. I feel like something that day changed. I've had a terrible feeling ever since. I haven't forgotten her look or voice. Am I overthinking it, or did she need help? I've even gone as far as to seek faith and religion for the sake of help. Maybe she was mentally ill and needed help herself. I hope to find answers by sharing my story. Thank you. New Boston. It was Halloween night, 1997. I was out with my boyfriend, Sean, and his friend Chris. The party we were at had gotten busted before it even got going, so we ended up going back to Chris's house. I should have just had them take me home first. Chris lives out in New Boston. If you're familiar with New Hampshire, you'd know that New Boston is in the middle of nowhere. Chris scored some weed at the party and wanted to go back to his house and do bong hits. Sean always wanted to get high, so off we all went. Chris's family lived in a rundown farmhouse that had 7 bedrooms, but only 2 were usable. The house was falling apart. From the road, it looked abandoned. There was no bathroom, just an outhouse. It sat on 24 acres of land, and there were no neighbors you could see in any direction. The backyard was just a big field that backed up to the woods. We were sitting at the edge of the field, and Chris and Sean were hitting the bong. I was sitting there bored out of my mind. It was freezing out at that time of night, and I was so ready to go home. All of a sudden, I hear Chris say, "What the duck?" Standing a few feet away was an old man. He was wearing a white t-shirt and boxer shorts and nothing else. He had this massive smile on his face. His whole face seemed taken up by the smile, and his eyes were completely white. I screamed, and we all took off running towards the house. Chris's dad went outside with his shotgun but didn't see anything. The guy was gone. We never heard him coming, and where the hell did he even come from anyway? Collection of paranormal stories from my childhood. A little background: I grew up in rural New Jersey. The house I grew up in was new, built by my parents when they decided they wanted to start a family. The property had previously been old farmland, as was most of the area, and had been largely undisturbed until my parents bought the property and had the house erected. Set far back from everything, we had a long gravel driveway, and some elements of the farm that once resided there remained, such as some very old, rusty barbed wire in the wood line and old stone walls that had once marked property lines, not essential to the story, but to help paint a picture. When I was 4, my mom gave birth to my brother, who we will call Jake. Then when I was 6, my mom gave birth to my youngest brother, who we will call Matt. I don't recall having any paranormal experiences at home before Matt was born. Everything seemed normal until my parents decided to build an addition to the house. This decision was made because we primarily needed another bedroom for Matt, as my parents wanted us to all have our own rooms. So my parents had a construction company come and dig up the yard some more to extend the foundation, add on a family room, and add on another bedroom. Matt was finally born, and the addition was completed. Being the oldest child, I had dibs, and I was promised the newest bedroom. I finally moved all my stuff into my new room, and this is where things started to change for me. The atmosphere in that room was different from the rest of the house. I felt rather uncomfortable being in there, especially alone. I always had this feeling that someone was standing like 2 inches behind me and staring at me. I had this feeling 24/7 when I was in that room. When I'd want to go to sleep, I'd have to figure out which way I wanted to face, toward the wall or toward the open. I felt vulnerable to whatever I felt watching me if I faced toward the wall. But if I faced toward the open room, I feared opening my eyes and potentially seeing a figure that didn't belong. I tried telling my parents that I didn't feel comfortable, and I ended up sleeping on the floor in either of my brother's rooms from time to time. But my parents had had enough and made me go back to my room. So I forced myself to deal with it for a while, trying to play it off. Until one night, I heard a thud toward the back of my room. I sat up and looked back, finding that a figurine had fallen to the floor from one of my shelves. And immediately thereafter, I heard footsteps creaking across my floor to my bed. I bolted out of there and knew something was up. I spent the next 3 months or so sleeping in my brother's rooms, and my parents let that slide because they saw how terrified I was after that night. I was totally afraid to go in my room after that for a while. At this time, I'd like to mention that neither my mom nor my maternal grandmother was a stranger to paranormal activity. My mom, especially, since she experienced a lot as a child. During this time, my maternal grandmother came to visit and stayed in my room for a few days, since I wasn't using it. After the last day there, she told my mom in confidence that there was something wrong in that room and she didn't feel comfortable at all. And then proceeded to tell my mom about the feeling that she was being constantly watched. My grandmother said she'd never spend a night in that room again. I didn't learn this until years later, but it explains why my mom sort of eased up on me after that visit and makes me feel less crazy that someone else experienced that. In addition to feeling uneasy in my room, my grandmother informed my mom that she occasionally noticed a black figure moving up and down the stairs while she was sitting in the family room. My mom assured her that she was not hallucinating, and she did indeed see a black figure moving up and down the stairs. I also learned later on from my mom that she would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and see a child figure next to the bed staring at her, but it wasn't any of my brothers or me. She said it used to startle her, but she ended up ignoring it. Jake acted a little weird around this time too. He was still quite young, but he used to be terrified to go into the bathroom by the stairs because he said, "There is a man in the wall." Skip ahead a couple of years. Some time has passed, and things seem to have settled down. I had been able to return to my room and felt a little less scared to be in there, but I still kept my head on a swivel. I was glad that things were looking up, but the situation wouldn't last forever. My parents went through a pretty bitter divorce. Sparing you the details on how we got there, things got nasty for a while. Lots of yelling, screaming, and overall destructive behavior. The atmosphere of the house became very full with anger. It wasn't that long before some paranormal things returned. Luckily, I spent most of my time living with my mom elsewhere during the divorce, but my brothers and I still had to stay at my dad's every other weekend. Little things started happening, but they were no longer isolated to any one room. Remember the presence I felt in my bedroom some years back after the addition to the house? Well, that presence came back, but this time I felt it all over the house. I was legitimately afraid to go back there because I didn't feel secure anywhere in the house at that point. But I went anyway because it was the law. I had to go as part of the divorce agreement. I watched some stuff move on its own. Things turned on by themselves. For instance, I remember being on the first floor by myself late at night when everyone else was upstairs sleeping. I was getting ready to head back up, and the VCR in the family room turned on along with the surround sound system, and Star Wars resumed where I left off. Another day, the record player in the family room had once randomly changed speeds from 33 revolutions per minute to 78 revolutions per minute, so whatever was playing sounded like the Chipmunks version. And lo and behold, I had a Darth Vader lamp in my bedroom that decided it would also like to randomly turn on. This thing must have really liked Star Wars. I couldn't wait for my weekends with my dad to finish because of these things. The last scary thing I can remember happening to me there was when I was taking a shower. I heard what sounded like a music box right on the other side of the curtain. And I looked, and there was no one there. Eventually things had settled down. Tensions cooled and all as time went on. It's been some time now since I've last experienced anything paranormal while visiting my dad. To this day I believe that the things I experienced in that house were a combination of disturbing the soil and the negative energy introduced during the divorce of my parents. Thank you for listening. I just wanted to share some personal experiences my family and I had while I was growing up. Shadow people, spirit portals, and instinct. I grew up in an Illinois suburb. At first, nothing stood out as unusual. My family settled here after my father became disabled because of the good school system from K-12. My mom started looking into Wicca and becoming a spiritual person. She invited friends from her Wicca group over to our house one Halloween back in the early 2000s. They didn't like the vibe of an entrance to a jogging trail through the local park. They became quite freaked the duck out by it and left before nightfall. They said it was a portal through which the spirits would enter our world. I knew exactly what they were talking about. Because I've always seen shadow people in the area around my house. They always lurked at the corner of my vision. Sometimes, I would see gigantic shadow people, towering over the houses, Lurched over. Going out into the park was a nightmare-inducing affair. I went out there at night once with my little bro. I got an extreme case of goosebumps about halfway through the jogging path down to the park. It was an October night, around 9 p.m. We were just chilling, going down to the park to use the swings to kill time. And then suddenly my instincts kicked in, screaming for me to get us the duck out of there. It was all that I could do to run as fast as we could. I screamed at my little brother to run fast. It was this primal fear. I was going to encounter something dangerous. It was behind me, a darkness that I couldn't comprehend. It was a shadowy form, out of focus for me. I've never been more afraid of anything in my life. We got the duck out of that park as quickly as we could. I wasn't prepared. I never would be. I've moved thousands of miles from that little suburb, and it still haunts me. Writing this out has given me goosebumps. I feel a raw fear that permeates every part of my being. What could I do but get my little brother and me out of there? Who knows what could have happened? The events of that night continue to haunt me. It was ducking awful. And let me leave y'all with advice. If your body is compelling you to leave a situation, follow your instincts. It may just save your life, as I believe it did for me. I was already very positive there are things in this world that we just cannot explain with any certainty, science, or calculations. But this story is something that will stay with me the rest of my life. I was in a rehab. The rehab facility I was in was quite modern and was classified as an inpatient hospital. It wasn't an actual hospital or on the grounds of a hospital but was staffed 24/7 with doctors, nurses, counselors, and obviously patients. I was a patient at the time and had been in the past. Sobriety can be a long road. No one had ever said the place was haunted. I want to make that clear. The place did not have a reputation for being haunted. That said, several people, men and women, have died on the premises. 1 or 2 deaths were overdoses from smuggled in drugs. And another couple from withdrawal complications. This is what we were told by the counselors. They wanted us to know it was life or death. Better to get it right now than to have something like this happen to you in the future. At that moment, I was navigating the journey of recovery. And several minor things happened that made me go, However, one night I am totally passed out sleeping. And I am having a pretty terrible nightmare. The kind that you just want to wake up from because they are so brutally vivid and horrid. I finally managed to wake up out of this dream. And this is what I wake up to. I open my eyes and am looking at the large window that takes up a whole wall of the room. Imagine a sliding glass door-sized window going across the whole wall. The window looks over a parking lot from the second story of the building. The streetlights illuminate the parking lot, and the glow from the streetlights creates a very dim backlight. And in front of this dim background is a shadow figure literally staring into my eye sockets the minute I opened them and came out of the dream. This thing, that I could see from the waist up, was perpendicular to the ground. So I am lying down, and this thing is standing the same way I am lying. I want to try to be clear, it is standing in front of me as if it were standing on the wall sideways. So when I open my eyes, it is as if we are having a noon shootout 12 paces apart. The thing is lined up with me sideways, and I am in a bed lying down. For about a whole second. Nothing happens, and I am coming out of the dream, trying to duck and grasp what the duck I am even seeing. It's darker than the dim backlight. Like pitch black. The shadowy figure then suddenly realizes that I am looking at it. And it darts through the wall so abruptly as if because it was seen and the gig was up. As it is darting through the wall, it hits the blinds, the long dangling kind, and this long chain that was for opening/closing the blinds. When I opened my eyes, I briefly had a stare down with a shadow person standing sideways, and then the shadow figure exclaimed, "Oh shit, he's awake," before darting through the wall and smashing into the blinds and chain in just a few seconds. That is precisely what I am telling you. So I am fully freaked out at this point. I jump out of bed and turn every single available light on, and the ducking blinds are still swaying from the contact with this ducking shadow figure. And I didn't dare go anywhere near that section of the room. I am like, what the duck was that? Then the very next thought was, not one person in the world will ever believe me. After much time, there was no further explanation or shadow person. I calm myself down enough to get a few hours sleep. Here's the ass kicker. I wake up in the morning. And I am not joking, the chain for the blinds is still ducking swinging. Keep in mind it was 3 a.m. when this all happened. 3 a.m., and it's still ducking swinging from getting nailed by a darting shadow figure. So at this point I need a witness. I hear people waking up, and I run and grab my closest rehab buddy. And I'm like, dude, you won't believe this, but come look at this. I give him a quick rundown of what happened and show him the still swinging window chain. He was absolutely stunned, to say the least. But he also knew I wouldn't just bullshit him for no reason. So he looks at the chain, which is still steadily swinging, and is like, WTF, man, when did this happen? I'm like, brew 3 a.m. So he decides not to touch the chain. And we decide, let's see what happens. I mean, it won't keep perpetually swinging, right? We go to breakfast. Come back up to our rooms at 9 a.m. He and I immediately went to my room to check the chain. And it is still mother ducking swinging with literally no discernible way of keeping its momentum. We walk up to it slowly, examining if any fans, vents, or airflow of any kind are pushing this chain in its perpetual path. And no possibility of anything causing it to continue swinging. Finally my buddy cracks, very hesitantly he grabs the chain. And stops it. As any good investigator would, he checks it and around it and is like, that is so strange. Let's see if we can get it to do it by ourselves. This began after about 2 hours of swinging the chain ourselves. And every single time, it wouldn't keep perpetually swinging. It just wouldn't. We tried everything to duplicate the swinging. And could not get it to swing for more than 30 seconds before it came to a stop. My buddy just looks at me and is like, I believe you 100%, nothing else even makes sense, you couldn't have made it do that on your own. He and I kept in touch for a while after we graduated from rehab. Always talking about this story. Our only regret was not letting it continually swing. We wonder if it would still be swinging today if we had left it. If anyone knows anything about perpetual motion, it is very hard to create. The majority of the time, an energy source is actually required. The energy source in this case was a sideways standing staring dating shadow figure. Like I said, other things happened, but this was the cake taker. I will forever believe there is more to this world than what we are told. Thanks for listening to this. Ghost. To begin, my house is about 180 years old, so I'm not sure who all has lived in it, but when my family first moved in, my dad had joined the neighborhood Facebook group, and another guy living in our cul-de-sac who was about 75, let's call him Rob, told my dad this story about the previous owners of our house. Basically this nice family had moved in, consisting of a husband and a wife and her 3 daughters, who became his stepkids. They did many renovations to the house, including adding a hot tub to the backyard and adding more windows, and it was said that during renovations the neighbors could hear the husband and wife argue quite a lot. Rob stated that the husband's car started to never be around the driveway of the house and would only arrive late at night. Fast forward about a year, the husband started to have an affair with a woman across the street from our house, and his eldest stepdaughter caught him and told her mother, which resulted in them leaving him for good. Completely devastated, the husband starts doing drugs, and Rob said all sorts of weird people started to show up to his house, beat-up old vans and men in suits just randomly popping up. One day the husband took way too much of something and got into the hot tub and, unfortunately, died. Now that's a story all on its own, but here is where it gets creepy. My father told me this story a few weeks before Halloween, when we were sitting on the couch deciding on what horror movie we should watch for a Halloween party we were planning on hosting. Then he told me that when we first moved in, my sister, 3 at the time, would not go into her room, which is now my room, because of a man that was hanging in the corner and would talk to her at night. Even worse, our new hot tub sits right where the old one used to be and will constantly malfunction. Also remember when I mentioned the new windows put in? Well, I have had friends come over when no parents were home, and they would ask about my dad or the man that was staring at them through the windows of the house. I know this probably isn't the scariest story you will ever read or possibly put on your channel, but it's one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me or my family. I was house sitting for some friends, and they rent out part of their upstairs room for a cheap price to the local college students. I used to rent from them, and when I moved out, I moved down the street, so I was an easy contact for pet care or house sitting while they were on trips. Needless to say, I knew the place well and was super comfortable taking care of it. Well, the first night I was around, I was cooking dinner, and I heard something fall down the stairs to the upper bedroom. It sounded like a box full of books. Like it was loud. The upper bedroom stairwell is closed off by a door, and I wasn't sure if the current tenant was around, so I knocked and asked if they were okay. I didn't get a response, so I yelled I was coming up to check on them. I opened the door, and the stairwell was empty. No box, no nothing. Went upstairs, and there was no tenant, and there wasn't anything I could see that was out of place. I was confused but summed it up as just something my mind made up. A couple nights later I was getting ready for bed. I was staying in the downstairs guest bedroom, and there's a light that's on a slider that will dim when someone adjusts it. There was also a sliding door I had closed to the bedroom. All this will come into play in a sec. Well, I was in bed and had the light all the way on when I heard footsteps upstairs. It was a heel-to-toe kind of sound, and it was making a figure-8 pattern in the bedroom upstairs. It was still decently early, maybe around 8 or so, and I texted the tenant to let her know I was downstairs and to let me know if I was making too much noise and to just shoot me a text. It was maybe an hour later, and I heard the footsteps again before receiving a reply from her. She said she was in the process of moving out and was actually out of town for 2 weeks, so not currently home. The footsteps stopped suddenly, and after a few beats the sliding light in the bedroom slowly dimmed to off. I had about a second or two of silence before the sliding door to the bedroom rang out with a huge bang and started swaying on the sliding pole it was on. It looked like a person had punched it from the other side. Of course, when I opened it there was no one around. I gathered my things and left the house. I still did all the chores throughout the week and took care of things around the home, but I did not stay in that house after that. I didn't have anything spooky like that happen to me while I was renting the upstairs, but there was an attic door that liked to open up in the middle of the night. I initially believed it was merely an old house, and that such occurrences were to be expected. However, following this experience, I am no longer certain. My paranormal experiences. My apartment is haunted. Here are all the encounters I have had in my apartment. These are all true. 1. The cabinet. One day during the summer I was in the living room with my 3 cats, and I only thought 2 of them were with me. Then I heard a cabinet close in my mom's bathroom. I was so sure it was one of my cats that I went into my mom's room/bathroom saying, "Aw. Which cat is playing over here?" Because my cats have accidentally opened and closed the cabinets before when playing, but when I looked around, none of my cats were there. And when I checked back in the living room, my other cat is sleeping under the chair I was sitting on before. 2. The ghost girl. One night when I was lying in bed on my phone, with my door cracked so my cats could get in and out, I saw something at my door out of the corner of my eye. I saw a little girl, whose height was right below the doorknob, with long black hair and a white dress/nightgown, staring at me. But when I actually looked, she disappeared. 3. The hand. First off, we have a hallway that leads to our front door that you can see from the living room. So I was sitting on one of the chairs in our living room when I saw a big hand go around the corner of the hallway. And the hand was about 5.5 feet up, but when I turned that way and looked where I saw it, there was nothing. 4. The black demon/man. This is my most memorable and crazy experience. There is a designated shoe area near the front door hallway, as I mentioned previously, and I was seated in the same chair from the living room when I observed something once more. In the corner of my eyes I saw a tall figure, about 6 feet 7 inches, who was all black and was kind of hazy, just standing, facing me, about 3 feet away from the shoe area. But when I looked, of course, it was gone. But I and my mom hung up a Harry Potter candle in that same area/hallway for Halloween. And guess what happened? In the same exact spot, a candle that we hung up kept turning on by itself. And you might think it's a glitch, but all of a sudden it just stopped working. And it was a new battery, which we had just gotten from the store. So my mom replaced the battery. And what do you know, it started happening again. My mom and I just took the battery out and haven't put it back in. When the battery was in and all the candles were lit, that particular candle would sometimes be the only one that wasn't lit. 5. My ghost cat. This one has been happening all the time, but we have a ghost cat. We have 3 cats/kittens. Biscuit, who was our first one and is orange, Gravy, who is siblings with our third cat and is gray, and Honey, who is orange with white paws and chest and siblings with Gravy. So what has been happening is I have been seeing a cat walk or move in the corner of my eye, but when I turn to see who it is and to pet it, there's nothing there. 6. The noises. So recently, my mom and I have been hearing noises on our roof, like somebody walking or moving, but the thing is, we live on the 3rd floor. Therefore, I theorize that there might be something on our ceiling that moves around or possibly even resides there. But I'm not too sure about this one. My mom doesn't believe me about really any of this stuff, but I do. The house I live in was haunted, true story. This is by far the spookiest experience my family and I have had regarding the paranormal. I am currently living in Australia, and the incident all started when I moved into my current house around 3 years ago. In my culture, we believe that whenever a family moves into a new home, a priest should come to perform various prayers to bless the house. However, when my mom bought the house, we immediately went on holiday for 3 months, so we were unable to perform the rituals. Everything started when we first came back to our house. My mom raised me alone, so it was just the 2 of us at home. I was still in high school, and my mom worked in the city, so we both took the train every morning. My mother consistently departed from home earlier than I did, making it my responsibility to secure the residence each morning. My mom worked late almost every day, so I would arrive home first and be home alone for at least 5 hours every day. One morning as I left home, I began to feel paranoid that I had not locked the door, so I walked back to verify it. The door was locked. Later that day when I came home from school, I walked up my driveway to find that the door was wide open. I freaked out, but I was brave enough to go inside. Our kitchen is pretty close to the entrance, so I grabbed a knife and searched the entire house. There was no one there. I decided not to tell my mom because she was really stressed with work, and I did not want her to freak out. Over the next few days, another weird thing started happening. Our garage door would start randomly opening whenever we were home. My mom was somewhat frightened, but we then considered that our neighbor's garage remote might operate on the same frequency, which could be causing our door to open as well. So, we dismissed it. It had been about 2 months since we were living in our new house, and everything seemed to be normal again. Until one day when I was woken up in the middle of the night by my mom. She looked super scared and asked me if I had come to her room to wake her up. I said no, I was half asleep and had no idea what she was rambling on about. She didn't believe me and made me swear that I hadn't. I always play scare pranks on my family, so that was why. I swore I didn't and asked her what was up. My mom is a super light sleeper, and so while she was sleeping, she heard someone prop her door open. She looked up and saw the figure of a boy and thought it was me. She asked what was wrong and blinked. There was nothing there, and her door was still open. She called my name a few times, and there was no response, hence why she came to my room. I have to admit, given the stuff happening with the doors, I was kind of scared, but I convinced my mom that she was imagining things, and she went back to sleep. Ever since that night, up to this day, my mom still sleeps with her door open and the living room light on, and I do not blame her after what happened next. 2 weeks after this incident occurred, my mom's best friend and her son and daughter, they were both around my age, came over from our homeland, Malaysia, to visit us. I was really excited, as I have always been close to them. One thing you should know about my aunt, she's had many experiences growing up with the paranormal, and so she is super scared of ghosts. For this reason, she and her kids always used to play pranks on her. One day the 4 of us were playing poker on the dining table while my mom was taking a nap in the living room. Suddenly my mom rushes out of the living room, her eyes are wide open, and she looks really scared. She asked her who had woken her up from her nap. The 4 of us were dumbfounded, as we had been playing cards the entire time. She then told us that she felt someone tap her shoulder while she was asleep. When she opened her eyes, there were 2 feet on the floor. Once again, she blinked, and the feet were gone, and there was no one there. My mom was full on freaking out now, especially after what happened the other night. Then my aunt, given how afraid she is of ghosts, started to freak out too. I didn't want her holiday to be ruined, so I managed to convince them that my mom was probably in the middle of a dream, so when she woke up she was probably hallucinating. Yes, I know it sounds stupid, but hey, it worked. But then the next day, something else happened. My mom had gone to the shops to get groceries, the kids and I were playing video games in the living room while their mom was having a shower. Suddenly we hear the bathroom door burst open, and out runs my aunt wrapped in her towel. She screamed at us, telling us to stop trying to scare us and that it wasn't funny. The 3 of us were super confused, and her daughter asked her what had happened. She told us that she knew that we were the ones knocking on the bathroom door even after she told us to stop 3 times. I know it probably seems like she was overreacting, but I cannot emphasize how scared she is of ghosts. I exchanged a concerned look with her kids and then told her that it genuinely was not us and that we were playing FIFA, best game ever, the entire time. Soon my mom got home, and we told her what happened. Let's just say that my aunt started sleeping with her room lights on for the rest of her trip. Soon my aunt and her kids had gone home, and it was back to me and my mom again. We were back to our routine, my mom was finally at peace, and she had not seen anything for a while, apart from the garage door opening on its own every once in a while. The same, however, could not be said for me. It seemed that it had become my turn to be tormented. As I mentioned before, with my mom at work, I would be home alone for a few hours every day. I began to start hearing things. The strange thing is it would never occur while I was in the living room. Whenever I went to use the restroom or sat in my room, I would start hearing things coming from the living room and kitchen. It started out small. Just the sound of some panting, like if you had run a marathon. That kind of panting. But the minute I entered the living room, nothing. There would be no sound at all. It soon started to get worse. I would hear footsteps pacing around outside my room and spoons and pots falling in the kitchen. But every time I stepped out into the living room, the noises would stop, and everything would be just as I left it. There was even an instance when I believed I heard a child's laughter just outside the door while I was in the restroom. I decided not to tell my mom yet because she seemed to be getting over her experiences, and I did not want to scare her again. But one day I felt that I needed to tell her, and we decided that day it was time we contacted our priest to perform the prayers for our house. It was the day my best friend and his parents came over for dinner. It all started as an innocent dinner. My best friend and his family were Malaysian too, and we were having a great time talking about home while having a signature Malaysian meal. My friend's dad was telling us a story when all of a sudden, his face just froze, and his eyes widened. He honestly looked like he was having a stroke. His face contorted into a frown, and he just stared down at the table. My mom and I shared a worrying look, but my friend and his mom just continued eating like nothing was happening. Suddenly his dad seemed to return to us, and he continued telling the story as if nothing had happened. But he could see that my mom and I looked worried. Suddenly his wife tapped his shoulder and said, "Just tell them." He frowned at his wife and just kept eating. There was an awkward silence for a few minutes, and then he finally decided to address the elephant in the room. He apologized for scaring us and assured us that there was no need to worry. He then went on to tell us about his life. Since he was a child, he had been very religious, and from a young age, he felt a very close connection to God. He regularly meditated and was very, very spiritual. He was so spiritual that when he was in his mid-20s, he had awakened a gift. He was able to see dead people. I kid you not, when he said this, I immediately looked at my friend, waiting for him to start laughing at some prank. But my friend's face was dead serious, and he continued looking at his dad as he told his story. He told us that he could see them everywhere, when he was walking his dog on the street, when he was sitting in the park, in people's houses, and even sometimes sitting on people who had been possessed. He said the spirits were drawn to him because they knew he could see them, and they would stalk him, begging him to help them reach the afterlife. He said there was simply nothing he could do because these people had died before their time and would have to wait on earth until it was their time. Back home, he was regularly contacted by people having paranormal experiences to perform a cleansing to drive evil spirits away. He told us about some of those experiences, but I do not feel like it is my place to share them here. He then asked us something that gave me chills. Have you guys performed prayers for your house yet? My mom refused to answer the question until he told her why he had asked that. He said that he did not want to worry us and that if we hadn't, we probably should. My mom continued to ask him why until he finally conceded. This is what he said: "Remember when I had that moment just now while I was talking? I had a visit. I won't tell you what it was, but it was the same spirit I saw standing at the front door when we came here." At that moment, my mom shared everything that had been happening with him. It was during this time that I decided to tell my mom about the things I had been hearing in the house. My friend's dad then informed us that he did not believe the spirit was malicious. However, to be cautious, it was time for us to conduct prayers for the house. Before he left, he asked my mom if he could see our altar in the prayer room. My mom took him to it, and we all followed him. As he stood in front of the altar, his body suddenly shook, as if he just had a giant hiccup. He then put his hands together and bowed his head. Before leaving, he said, "I can see why the two of you have not been hurt. You are both protected." That concluded their visit. A week later we arranged for a priest from our local temple to cleanse and bless our home. I promise you that ever since that day, nothing strange has ever happened in our house. Even the garage door has stopped opening on its own. I am not a particularly religious person, but I have learned my lesson. I will never move into a new house without performing the rituals that my culture demands. Witch on my back. I am an 18-year-old male. I am 5'10" inches, and I am not the biggest guy, and I have been hearing and seeing things since I was 6. This story takes place in the 4th house I lived in, currently in my 5th, and that was where the activity really picked up and actually scared me half to death. To the best of my recollection, my first experiences with the paranormal occurred when I was 6 years old. I heard footsteps around me while in the basement, and then something grabbed a pile of my drawings from the dresser in my room and threw them against the adjacent wall. It didn't help that my aunt had a dark entity in her basement who took the form of a large, imposing man. I never saw him, but my cousins did, and we couldn't be down there for more than a minute, and we would sprint up the stairs. This all took place in my 2nd house. Then, in my 3rd house, when I was 12 or so, visual phenomena started to occur. It was here where I saw doors open and close, shadow figures on 2 occasions, and an apparition, a tall and lanky male in a striped shirt and jeans, in the corner of my eye. After that, the occurrences stopped for years. I believed I would never see anything again, but I was completely mistaken. It was about 2 years after I moved into my 3rd house, 2017. I was about 17 at the time. So I had an unfinished basement, concrete floors, no drywall, and a completely open area. In this basement, there were 3 light bulbs. The shape of the basement was almost a deformed O, and the lights were placed at the ends of the U and one in the middle. So whenever I went to work out in the basement, only the light bulb in the space in front of me, one of the end ones, would start to flicker or flash, sometimes fast, other times not. It would only happen when I stepped onto the treadmill and would keep going till I stepped completely off, even if the treadmill was off. Then I would occasionally see a shadow in that space when I was not moving. This shadow would peek its head up from some boxes and then duck back after I noticed. My cats, I have 2, would also look over and sometimes look into space as if someone was standing somewhere. However, these lights were the occurrences that led up to what would happen later. It was a Sunday night in the summer, at about 1 a.m. or later. I was watching comedy videos and working on pieces of digital art. Art is the way I make a little income. I kept one ear of my headphones off out of habit so I could hear my family if they called me, and it was dead silent. My cats were with me at the time, and both were asleep next to me. It was after a little while when I heard a blood-curdling scream, as if a murder had just occurred downstairs. Only a few seconds after the scream and taking my headphones off, I heard a woman's voice. To the best of my recollection, the woman's voice matched the scream and asked, "Why are you screaming?" So I am practically floored and have to investigate. I walk out of my bedroom and down the hall to the loft area and the staircase. At first, I had tried to rationalize that maybe my sister had a nightmare, and my mom woke up and checked on her. So I check her room, which was upstairs, and lo and behold, my little sister was lying in bed, asleep, having passed out while watching makeup tutorials. Officially creeped out, I head to the stairs and lean over the railing. I am met with just complete and utter darkness. There were no lights on, no glow from the TV, etc. At this point, I am just a mix of confused and concerned but will myself to go back to my room. So I settled back down in bed and continued on the commission I was on, but this time I kept my headphones off and worked in silence, my senses on high alert. It was about 15 minutes or so before the activity continued. Surprisingly loud footsteps started up the carpeted stairs and into the loft area. At that moment, I believe I paled a few shades. A male voice sounded from the loft, and I could tell it wasn't my dad, and it surely wasn't me. So I got into protective mode since, unlike my room, my little sister's room was accessible from the loft. So I grabbed the only weapon I had in my room, a switchblade, as I thought it was possible an intruder was in the house. I texted one of my exes, we are still friends, who was still awake in the group chat we had. I told him what was going on and that if I didn't answer in a certain time frame by saying it was okay, he should call the police. So I searched the house and couldn't find anyone. I looked at all levels of the house to see if there was a car outside, if the doors were open, if a window was cracked, etc. There were no signs of intrusion. These events were only the starting point of what was to come. So as the months passed, there was the usual flickering and shadow in the basement, but I figured the light was just a wiring issue and was logical. That was until it started answering questions. I was messing around once after I was working out and was like, fine, if someone is there, make the lights flicker twice, or something like that, and it did on command. However, I never asked more questions, as I didn't want to get involved with whatever this thing was. However, it kept going, and I heard footsteps on several occasions in the hall, a shadow figure came up behind me, another scream, and something touched my hand at one point. So much activity was occurring that I kept a journal on my phone of the times and dates of these occurrences to see if I was crazy or not. After about a month, I was pissed off and started badmouthing whatever it was when I was in the basement and instantly regretted it. As soon as the final word escaped my lips, I felt an immense burning sensation on my hip, under my clothing. I pulled my clothing away and was greeted by a scratch running about 5 inches, starting at my hip and ending just above mid-thigh. Then about 2 days later, at about 1:30 a.m., I was asleep in my room and heard the papers of my desk start rustling and moving around as if someone was going through my stuff. My first instinct is that it is my kitten, who is extremely mischievous, and I look over. There was no one there, and I roll over onto my stomach and look at my tomcat, who is on the bed with me. He is looking wide-eyed behind me and starts to puff up like those Halloween decorations, a low growl in his throat. I was about to speak to him when I suddenly felt 2 hands on my shoulder blades and a pressure on my lower back, as if someone were sitting on me. It felt like one of my friends was sitting on me, as if we had just tussled or something. My first thought was, am I experiencing sleep paralysis? I have never had sleep paralysis, but my mom has. That was when I realized that I was awake and able to move. Instinctively, I start trying to thrash around and get whoever is on top of me off. Whatever it was wouldn't let me up off my stomach, so I was swinging my arms behind me. When my arm struck the area above my back, I felt an immense cold sensation, as if I had plunged it into an ice bath. However, This somehow got whatever it was off me, and I instantly flipped myself over to sit up and look around. Nothing. It was at this time that my cat started to calm down again, but neither of us went back to sleep that night. It was later that day that I felt the same burning sensation as a few days prior on my other hip, and an almost complete cut was on my leg. It was completely identical in placement and length to the previous one, but this time whatever did this drew blood. It was then I had enough and took every kind of measure I could to keep this thing at bay. Luckily, this stopped it, and we moved out 2 months later or so. Whatever was there didn't follow me to my new house, and I have been able to live 2 years without these experiences and be at peace. However, there are times when I wonder what that thing is and what it wants. Did it only want to hurt? Was it trying to do something else? I don't know, and even with this curiosity, I would rather not find out. From what I heard, a new family lives there now. I wonder if they have experienced anything like I did. Ghost on our street. My wife and I, with our 2 children, moved to a small town outside of Indianapolis last July, 2014. We moved to kind of get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and stress related to our professional lives. I had sold a business, and my wife was starting a new one on the south side of Indianapolis. Our children needed a break and a new life, so to speak, after the stress of their father becoming disabled and making it through emergency rooms and hospitals for a couple of years. I had been hurt in a car accident. One weekend last summer after moving into our new house, my wife got an invite to a bachelorette party in downtown Indy in tandem with a night in Broad Ripple, an area that's full of hipsters and college kids, a place we frequented when we first lived in Indianapolis after college in our late 20s. In fact, we lived in Broad Ripple for a year, thinking we were cool, only to discover that our rental was situated next to an undocumented offender, infested with cockroaches, and surrounded by crazy neighbors. We made all the proper arrangements, sending the kids off to Grandma and Grandpa's house so they wouldn't see the 3 a.m. shit show that their mother would require after 4 or 5 glasses of wine, a couple beers, and a shot or two, not to mention the fact that she might get roofied like so many other girls I have known over the past 10 years who frequented the bars in Indy's night spots. Attending this bachelorette party meant that I had to go pick her up after the shenanigans when the bars closed, which I gladly took on. The alternative was to have an Uber driver snatch my wife, plus fork over the $100 for the fare or pay the $20,000 or so in dealing with a DUI, not to mention the fact that she could kill or injure herself or others for that matter. Dealing with a group of intoxicated women is not enjoyable for me, especially since I have experience as a bartender during my college years. Therefore, I decided to wait until the last possible moment to leave our house and make the 45-minute trip into the city to pick her up before returning home. I left around 2:15 a.m. So far, the evening was normal, no weirdness, nothing outside the unusual. Just a few text messages came in about a drunk girl making an ass of herself, a guy trying to hook up, and a few love you, miss you type texts that got sloppier and more X-rated as the night progressed. After perusing the highway and dodging all the construction and orange barrels that litter the Indianapolis highway system, I made it downtown to pick up my not-so-violently drunk wife while watching the many drunks stumble along the curbs and lines into the bars. She was simply drunk, in a good mood, slurring her words, and begging for McDonald's grease to curb the coming headache from mixing wine and booze. I obliged, hitting the drive-thru at our home exit number 95 off I-65 South on the way back home. I tried to keep her from falling asleep so I didn't have to carry her all the way upstairs, banging her head on each rung of the stairs on the way up and then stripping her clothes off like a dead hooker in the dark. Terrible things. We eventually made it home, but the travels had tired her soul, so I got out of the car and came around to her side, which was when everything changed with regard to my normal evening. I could hear the faintest crying sound, almost like muffled crying, like someone was in a trunk. I did a 360 and looked around the Vinyl Village neighborhood and didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just dandelion-covered lawns, a feral cat, and some glowing eyes, I assumed from a raccoon looking for a midnight snack from some unsuspecting trash can or open garage along the street. As I opened the door and turned off the beeping alarm on our house, I heard it again, only louder, and decided I would come back out after getting my wife off to bed to check things out. Our neighborhood is new and located in a rural area where some families tend to keep their children up late, so I initially thought it might just be a family still awake practicing their parenting skills, but I wasn't sure. I locked the door and helped my wife to bed, dragging her upstairs and into the bed, tucking her in, and then looked outside from our upstairs window, still nothing and no sound from inside. Okay, maybe I was just hearing something. So, I went back downstairs, out the front door, and started to hear it again, only this time it had picked up quite a bit, louder and louder. I had walked to the edge of the driveway to see if I could tell where the sound was coming from. It was about 3:45 a.m., and I was starting to get a little freaked out about it. And that's when the crying got louder and unbearable, to the point I started walking down the street to find out what the hell was going on. I had decided it was a child, crying uncontrollably, and headed back home to decide what the hell to do. Then I heard don't and stopped dead in my tracks but was turned the other way. It had to be a kid, about 4 to 5 years old, screaming and crying and then stopping dead mid-sentence, saying don't in a commanding voice. It was extremely weird and creepy, and I would have pissed my pants had I not been up all night and tired to some degree. I thought maybe he was locked outside, or maybe a parent had come home from a long trip and woken their child in the back seat or something, and they woke up, like any kid in a bad mood, crying. There were no cars with lights on, no recent traffic down our street, and nothing I could see as a commotion, so that was out of the question. Then it hit me, someone is trying to snatch a child or something. So, being a licensed handgun permit holder and parent myself, I went back inside and grabbed my handgun and slipped it under my shirt into the small of my back where no one could see it. I thought, if someone is in danger or someone is snatching a kid, I'm going to put a freaking stop to it right now. I grabbed my phone off the counter and headed back outside, as I also planned to call the police. As I walked down the middle of the street, trying to figure out what was causing this child so much grief, I looked at all the windows, thinking maybe a kid was having a night terror, and I was hearing this from a bedroom window or something, but no windows were open, no lights were on, and there were no signs that anything was transpiring at any of my neighbors' homes. You can walk down the street and see who's up by the lights. This place was dark. I got about halfway down my street, which is probably 50 to 75 yards in a newly built neighborhood in Franklin, Indiana, a farming community, and that's when the crying turned into screaming. I was freaking out, my handgun drawn but down to my side, my phone already on 911, and then I pressed call to the police. This wasn't some ordinary scream. It was a blood-curdling, throat-bleeding scream, like you just smashed your hand in a car door, that lasted minutes and minutes and minutes. It went on for 5 to 7 minutes as I retreated to my driveway. Peeking between houses, I could swear it was coming from one specific house, but the sound was playing tricks on me, moving around. I don't smoke pot, drink, or use drugs, so I wasn't hallucinating, although I have in the past, but not in the past 15 years or so. By this time I had walked back and forth down the street, handgun drawn, and hadn't seen a thing. The 911 operator reported that she could hear the screaming and felt a noticeable shake while on the phone. She said these types of calls don't turn out well for those who get involved, and to go back inside and close the door and lock it. If you can see anything out the window, try, but take cover and let me know what you see. The baby or young child was screaming, crying, "Mommy, mommy," at this point, but nothing. I could see. I started hearing what sounded like pounding on doors and walls, something coming from down the block, from inside a house. It was like someone had taken a sledgehammer and decided to redecorate at 4 a.m. and beat their kids all at the same time. I opened my car door and threw the gun in as I heard sirens, thinking I would probably get shot if these cops showed up and I was standing in the street holding a gun with a child screaming/abduction call at 4 a.m., so I stood by my car, and then, like a door to a car, the sound just slammed shut. No whimpering, no weird car sounds, no doors, no windows, or anything, just stopped, but luckily right before the first officer arrived in full force, hearing the screaming as well, justifying my calling the police. In literally 2 minutes, there were 5 police cars, the first one hearing and grabbing his shotgun from the trunk and heading down the street, the screaming picking back up, and all canvassing the neighborhood. 2 officers took off on foot, 2 in cars, and 1 sat in the middle of the street. They turned their sirens and lights off and ran around the neighborhood for about 2 to 3 minutes before something crazy happened. The sound completely stopped, not to be heard again, and a small hatchback box-style hybrid turned down our street, past the police, and turned the corner at 50 miles per hour, literally squealing the tires as it went around the corner, all police cars in tow. Eventually there were no sounds, no baby, and the police returned with bad news. Nothing. The person who took off wasn't a criminal, didn't have a child in her car, and wouldn't explain why she took off like she did. The police went back to her house, searched it, and then took off. The lady never went back to her house, and I saw her leave her own home without even going back in. I had seen the car before, just a normal, regular, everyday middle-aged woman, a neighbor with nothing to hide. The police officer and I stood there and talked for 20 to 30 minutes. He had heard it too and was bothered by it as well, but there was nothing he could do without some more screaming or probable cause to start going through homes. He said half my neighbors wouldn't let him in anyway, even if a kid was screaming. He just shook his head and drove back down the street with his windows down. It must have taken him 5 minutes to go 50 yards and circle back, doing it 3 or 4 times before he waved and took off. This cop knew something was wrong. Now, I have seen a lot in my life, heard a lot, and even as a preteen and teenager done some crazy scary stuff. I used to go through abandoned houses and explore the deep woods that littered the countryside in Indiana when I was probably 12 with my buddies in the town I grew up in. At one point, as a teenager looking for something to do, I became a thrill seeker and explored a shut down and condemned former insane asylum on the west side of Indianapolis, which had 5 floors and was the size of a typical hospital. We also had gone into the old Triton Central School that burned with the kids inside, now abandoned, complete with lesson plans still on the chalkboards. I think there may be others who have shared videos about it. Nothing freaked me out more than what I am about to tell you. Several months later in October I had taken my kids to the bus stop and was gathering with all the other parents at the end of the street where my kids get on the bus every morning. We were talking about Halloween and if it was any good in this neighborhood, as my son wanted to know how much candy he was going to be able to bribe out of the residents. The kids jumped on the bus, and one of the moms stopped to talk at the end of my driveway. We were making small talk about neighbors and talking about all the rentals on our street and all the for sale signs, as I thought it was really weird that of the 15 homes, about half were either for rent or for sale. And that's when she dropped the bombshell on me. She just casually said, "Oh, you didn't know? This neighborhood is haunted." I gave her a look, like, "Yeah, right," and then she goes, "Have you ever heard crying or screaming in the middle of the night?" I was like, "Holy shit. Are you serious?" She said, "Yep, like we were talking about the Colts or something normal." That's when I recounted the story of my experience, including what the 9 to 11 operator heard and how the police responded. She said, "Yeah. The police think it's someone abusing their child and won't say what it really is. It's a ghost, a spirit, a haunting. It is malevolent and won't go away." She explained that the lady in the car no longer sleeps at night, often resorts to sleeping on the couch, and avoids going upstairs due to screaming and crying that occurs every few months at 3:45 a.m. on random days, lasting for 20 to 30 minutes. Doors slam, there's banging on the walls, etc. She said the lady used to sleep upstairs but would find herself sleeping on the couch and not have a clue how she got there. This neighbor apparently told this mom that she wasn't a sleepwalker and that her family, apparently single with no kids, that has stayed there for the holidays at times had an incident and no one will come to her house and that it's now for sale as well. She mentioned that her neighbors on the other side, who had just moved out, were so frightened and disturbed by this ghost that they left in the middle of the night and never returned. A moving company came and got all their stuff. They wouldn't go back in the house. The mother of that family is in a psychiatric facility and can't seem to get it together to come home. It messed her up so bad. So, I learned why all the homes are for sale and why people move in and then move out. At the one end of our street, apparently this spirit moves from house to house haunting, screaming, banging on walls, and slamming doors. I asked if it had ever happened at their house, and she replied, "Oh, yes, my husband refuses to enter our spare bedroom because an incident occurred there one night while the kids and I were at my parents' house. He was alone in the house and left at 4 a.m. and stayed in a hotel room. It freaked him out so bad." She said, though, that since and when the kids are home, it never happens. She said her daughter has an imaginary friend that plays with her in the spare bedroom but won't come out because of the bad mommy. Yeah, I know it's crazy. Since then all those homes are now sold, and all the rental homes are occupied. But, since they've cycled again and again, we're just waiting on the next victims to leave. I would love for someone to investigate records of the area or deaths from my neighborhood, but I can't seem to find anything online with old news stories, etc. I'm going to assume a child was probably hurt to the point of ending, and that is why we are being haunted, but who knows? Maybe the homes are now on top of an old cemetery. I wish I knew. Since writing this, I moved and have had a divorce. Several homes have been bought or rented. This normally happens around September or early October, I believe. Halloween story, my paranormal stories. Hello everyone. To celebrate the coming spooky season, I thought I'd share 2 paranormal stories that have happened to me over the years. My first paranormal experience happened when I was just a kid, probably not more than 10 years old. I was visiting a friend, male, who lived in a small town, while I lived in the city. We used to spend afternoons playing video games together. My friend lived with his grandmother in a big house, and his grandmother's brother, who was terminally ill, also lived there. He was a frail old man with pale skin, white hair, and light blue eyes. I rarely saw him, but I always felt uneasy around him, and we referred to him as Uncle. His room was right across from my friend's, and one of the house rules was no closed doors. One day, we were playing and making a lot of noise when I saw the grandmother's brother sit up on his bed through the partially open door. I saw his legs move as he sat up, and I told my friend and another friend who was with us to keep the volume down because we'd woken his uncle up. At that moment, my friend turned to me with wide eyes and asked me to repeat what I'd just said. I told him again that his uncle was awake. My only concern was that he'd tell us off for being too loud. Then, my friend looked seriously at me and said that his grandmother's brother had died about a month and a half ago. I insisted that I'd seen him. I saw him sit up in bed and even move. We all got frightened and ran out of the room. We ended up telling his grandmother, and she said she sometimes still felt her brother's presence in the house and wasn't surprised I'd seen him. She herself sometimes thought she saw him out of the corner of her eye while doing chores. After that scare, we moved the game console to the downstairs living room, and my friend even switched bedrooms with his grandmother. He was pretty shaken up and told me he couldn't sleep. The second story happened during my high school years. I don't remember exactly what year, but I was still young. One summer, I went to visit my grandfather, who lived in the countryside. That night, there was a party in the community, and my mother and brother decided to go, but I stayed with my grandfather. After dinner, I went outside to play with my grandfather's dog since he was watching TV. The patio was dark, except for the porch light meters away. I was playing with the dog when I suddenly saw a figure moving on the porch. The figure was ethereal, like a white mist moving in the air. I couldn't make out all the limbs, but I could see the shape and movement, which was exactly like my grandmother's. My grandmother, who had died earlier that year, had walked with difficulty, always using crutches, and she had a very distinct, slow way of moving. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. I thought I was imagining things. The dog didn't seem disturbed, though we were a bit far from the porch. But I watched as the figure walked across the porch and went inside the house. I was more confused than scared, so after a while, I went inside and started looking for the strange figure. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I went into the guest room where my mom, brother, and I usually stayed. Just as I was about to change into my pajamas, I saw a small ball of light float from the bedside lamp. It moved from the lamp, or maybe from the pillow, I'm not sure, and drifted towards the door that led to the living room. I peeked in, but it was gone. When my mother came back from the party, I told her everything, but she just said I'd imagined it and asked me not to tell my grandfather or brother. Apparently, my grandfather had been having strange dreams and visions lately, and this would only make it worse. These are two paranormal experiences that have really stuck with me, but my first encounter with a ghost happened in my own home. One day, I was in the living room with my grandmother, who lived with us in her final years. We were having a snack together, and then I went to the bathroom. Before reaching the hallway, I saw a tall figure with a hat walking toward me. Instinctively, I stepped aside to let it pass and was left shocked, not knowing what I'd just seen. My grandmother noticed something was up and asked me what was wrong. When I told her about the man in the hat, she just scolded me and told me to stop talking nonsense. So, that was the end of it. I have to admit, even though these stories sound scary, I was usually more confused than frightened, except when I saw my friend's uncle's ghost. That time I was terrified. My aunt, my mother's sister, has also seen ghosts since she was young, so it's normal in our family. My aunt has had several paranormal encounters and even saw her grandmother's spirit after she passed. A dog's spirit supposedly haunts her house, and she once claimed to have seen my grandmother in her bedroom. If anyone has theories or explanations for these encounters, feel free to share them in the comments, or please let me know if you've had similar experiences. I'd love to hear them. Featuring Mill Road, happy spooky season. My roommate and I were living on campus but decided we would rather start looking into renting a small, cheap home for us to transfer into. We knew we wanted to live near campus so the commute wouldn't be hell. Living in a rural area was bad enough, and our college campus had mainly forests surrounding it. Fortunately, the campus boasts cafes and stores, serving as the school's own college town. This town is literally made of us, the college students, my roommate Faith whispered to herself while skimming websites for available housing nearby. There aren't many options around here if we're looking to rent a house, she continued while turning over to me. I walked over and peered at her laptop. I started skimming pages as well and finally stumbled upon something available about 3 miles down the road. Interesting, I said. This place has 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a backyard. Guess how much? Faith mumbled sarcastically, too much for us? Nope. Apparently this leasing office is offering this rental for only $500 a month. Insane. Is this a prank? We paid double that on campus. And this guy who shared the offer, James, claims the utilities and such are included. Faith choked on her coffee and spit half of it out. Are you kidding me, Aaron? I know we live in the middle of nowhere, but $500 for a 2-bed/1-bath house? That doesn't sound right whatsoever. Like you said, we pay $1,000 for hours on campus, and it's smaller. She was right. Something was off, and this offer seemed too good to be true. On top of that, the offer was on Craigslist, which is known to be sketchy at times. Even without the Craigslist element, this guy's post was off as well. There was only one photo of the home, and although it seemed fine and put together, this photo didn't tell us much about the surroundings or the inside. Let's text him, his number is here. Faith started dialing the numbers on her phone. The man replied relatively quickly. I asked him if this is a joke because it's far too good to be true. Ha ha. I rolled my eyes at her and laughed, but her face suddenly turned blank. He doesn't seem to have a sense of humor, but, he said come by. He gave the address and directions. Here. I grabbed her phone and saw that he replied with, it's real. If interested, come by to view. The home is at 277 Fort Mill Road. I wasn't at all familiar with the area because we had both just started attending university after transferring from Ohio to Utah. I wasn't a moron, though, I'd be able to find it. We hopped in my car and started Google Maps. It again was very close, only 3 miles south of us. As we got closer, we noticed the map on our phone showed mainly shrubbery and forest ahead. We automatically knew we were heading into a deserted area of some sort. Isolated towns and villages have always spooked me, but heading into one was making me extremely anxious in that moment. I could tell Faith saw the emotion on my face. Are you good? I know you watch a load of horror movies. Especially lately. Don't worry, she smirked and then told me that her map seemed to show that the only grocery store was still on campus, as well as any type of shopping in general. I sighed, well, I guess we will be doing some traveling with shopping. No more rolling out of bed and walking over to Starbucks. She laughed and shrugged her shoulders. We were a few moments away from the road. We started pulling up to it and noticed that the entire block was the only area nearby covered in some type of sand or dirt. Basically a dirt road. Everything surrounding the homes on this one block was covered in greenery and trees. It almost looked like these houses were planted on an abandoned baseball field. We got out of the car and texted James that we arrived. He told us earlier that he would meet us there, but I honestly didn't expect this. This looks like an isolated mini ghost town. Does anyone know of this road? The map is showing that we're the only ones out here. Our house is located next to 3 others. Does he live in one of them? I don't know, Faith, I snapped. I was getting more anxious as I waited for him to arrive so I could ask him what the hell was up with this whole area. We seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. Just as my thoughts were spinning out of control, I heard some rocks tumble. I turned around and saw a man walking toward us with rain boots as he shuffled along the path of rocks and sand. May I add, the lawns on the property were non-existent. The homes had more large patches of dirt and rocks in the front yard where grass should have been. Hello there. I'm James. James spoke with a low voice and looked in his mid-40s. He was wearing a somewhat dirty hoodie, covering most of his head and face. He shook our hands as we reluctantly accepted, and I immediately threw my questions at him. Girls, I am a busy man. It's a great deal for college students in the area at a cheap price and convenient location. Privacy and peace are all you'll get out here. Nice change, huh? I just rented out this home and am currently offering it for $500, as listed. The other 3 on Ft. Mill Road are inhabited by families at the moment. If one leaves, I will be offering it to any college students interested as well. Let your friends know. Everything he told us made sense, I suppose. I wanted to ask why the road was so isolated from everyone else in town, as well as why there were only 4 houses on it in total. I was slightly scared to ask any more questions beyond the basics of moving in and price. He seemed to be rushing us, but the truth is, Faith and I were desperate to leave our dorm. It was small, stuffy, and noisy at night when some students above us would throw frequent parties. This seemed like the perfect solution and opportunity for us. I turned to Faith, who seemed speechless. Do you want to do this? She turned to the house, which was basic. Cream exterior, brown roofing, small home. Nothing special. Let's see inside first, Faith demanded. I stared her down, signaling her to chill out. James immediately headed toward the house that was for sale and motioned us over. Come on, girls. I need to be leaving soon, as I have much work to do still. It's getting late. We followed this stranger toward the house as we looked at each other in confusion. Still, we followed him. As we walked inside the door, everything seemed normal. It was quiet and smelled like a new home, though the air had a heavy odor of sawdust and dirt. It must have been from the foundation or outside of the home. I wonder how old these homes even were, but I wasn't about to ask more questions and ruin this opportunity. James seemed like the type of guy who wasn't okay with wasting time or bullshitting. Here we are, he waved us inside. There was a kitchen attached to a small living room, a bathroom, and our 2 bedrooms. It was so normal it almost diminished any anxiety I had been holding inside. Seems good. Water is working? Electricity? I asked James. Yep. I must tell you, though, that issues may arise, but nothing serious. If any power or water issues occur, you may reach me, and I will work on it as soon as possible. This side of town has relatively frequent blackouts because of the storms in the summer. Anyway, the deposit is $250, and you may submit rent to me on the last Friday of the month. Faith and I were getting worn out and honestly just wanted to go home and sleep. We agreed that we wanted to go for it. Okay, I have cash for deposit. Do you? Faith asked. I grabbed cash out of my wallet and counted as Faith reached in hers and took it out. We split it and handed the money to James. Thanks, ladies. When will you want to move in? Faith and I told him that the morning after would be fine. We needed to still gather our belongings and alert campus of our decision to transfer to a new residence. The next morning, we were ready to move in. Being college students, we didn't really have much anyway, so it was pretty easy. When moving in, I couldn't help but notice again how odd it was that only 4 homes, including ours, resided on this block. I peered into the other 3 homes, which looked identical to ours. I can't lie, these homes looked super cheap. Not ancient, not brand new, but also not at all a good investment. The homes all had blinds that were covering all of the windows of the house, so it was impossible to see inside. I was extremely curious. Don't you find it weird? I feel like we're all alone out here. Our neighbors aren't even visible, and where are their cars? Faith contemplated. I also felt uneasy when noticing that. Why didn't they have cars? Even 1 car outside of each home would be normal. He said there were families in them. They were inhabited. I find it a strange word to use in this context. Let's just set everything up, I said as I carried our bags inside. Faith took some more and then parked our car on the side of the home. We were going to have a guy come out there and set up our cable/Wi-Fi, but we received a call from him out of nowhere. Hi, Aaron. This is Doug, from Spectrum. You had an appointment with me tonight, but I see that you live in the FT Mill area. I paused for a moment, confused. Yes? Fort Mill Road. Is there an issue? He paused as well. Issue isn't the word, I guess. The thing is, setting up Wi-Fi and cable out there will be tricky. I have been having bad luck lately due to the unreliable connection and power in that area. The signal isn't strong at all. Do you want me to still try? It may be useless to attempt. I didn't know what to say. It was weird, but we did live in a rural town. I didn't expect this issue, though, with the home. It's okay, let's try it out, and if it's still shoddy, we can live with it. Some TV here and there and some signal to complete my homework will suffice for now. Deep inside, though, I was aggravated because I would rather not run into issues now with power or doing my schoolwork. I realized we may need to travel more than expected to campus. Now we needed to make trips for food, shopping in general, and Wi-Fi connection. At this point, I was too tired to care. The man showed up and set up everything, and as I watched him leave, I noticed the sun setting and the lights illuminating the inside of the homes on the block. Every home glowed with light from behind the curtains, seeming to be instantaneous. It was very odd and startling at best. Faith walked up behind me, scaring me. You saw that too? She peered at the homes and squinted for a while. I can't see shit inside. It was true. You couldn't see a thing. The blinds were so thick, and every window of each home just sat there aglow. I just don't get it. I haven't seen anyone ever walk inside or outside of those homes. There are still no cars outside. Should we ask James? Faith nervously asked. I kept looking up and down our road. It was starting to bother me more and more. It was just sketchy enough to pique my curiosity again. I'm calling James about this power issue and asking him why our neighbors are so odd, Faith blurted out as she ran over to the couch. We sat in silence there as Faith texted James. I'm just waiting to see what he has to say. It's early still, we can always back out of this arrangement. My mind was racing. I wanted a cheap house. I also wanted privacy and peace. Isn't that what we signed up for here? Why was I suddenly so worried about this situation? A loud noise came from the other side of the room. It was Faith's phone, a text from James. She read it aloud. Your neighbors signed up for some privacy as well. Try not to be so nosy and let them be. As far as the power and Wi-Fi, I alerted you of this, and you accepted. I looked at Faith with confusion. He was being so rude and blunt with us. It's almost as if he was telling us to shut up and accept it because we were stuck with it. I didn't like this. I had an overwhelming feeling, nausea. I truly felt something wasn't right. This whole situation had been so sketchy and unofficial from the start. This guy's professionalism and help were almost non-existent, and he didn't seem to be who he said he was. What kind of leasing officer would act this way? I think we need to leave. This is a joke. I don't even feel safe with this guy as our supposed landlord, Faith mumbled. I agreed but didn't want to make any decisions until morning. I turned to Faith and sleepily said, "Let's get some rest and figure it out tomorrow. It's late." She just shrugged and rolled over. I woke up early that morning to the sound of rain outside. It was hushed out here, with the sound of rain hitting the roof being the only thing noticeable. I yawned and got up, still feeling out of it. As I waddled over to the kitchen to quickly make coffee, I noticed my car window slightly open as I peered out the kitchen window. What the hell? I walked outside and looked into the backseat. My backpack was gone. I had my laptop and textbooks in there, as well as my wallet. I have no idea why I left my wallet in the car, but I did. I felt like an idiot. At that moment, I was livid and had had enough of this. I called the cops. I waited outside the house, in the rain. As Faith came outside after waking up, she hugged me. "Are you okay?" I turned to her. "No. I called the cops. I'm telling them what's going on. Someone stole my backpack from my car. I left the window open. I also left my wallet in there." She looked stunned. "What did you leave in the wallet?" "Cancel your cards if you left them in there. I hope you didn't leave too much cash in it." I did. I left $450 and change, as well as all my cards. I hopped on my phone and got ready to request cancellation of all of them. As soon as I signed into my app, my bank alerted me of fraudulent activity that had occurred moments before. I looked down at my phone, feeling lightheaded. This guy had been using my credit and debit cards to buy artillery and went on a Walmart spree, totaling thousands of dollars in a matter of 2 hours. What the hell was going on? The cops showed up moments later, and as a female officer stepped out, I ran toward her. "Officer, thank you for coming so fast," I said as I ran out of breath. "I've had some valuables stolen, and I'd like to talk to you about the situation here." She listened as I explained our predicament, and as I tried to finish, she cut me off. I hadn't even told her about the living arrangement yet. "Aaron, thank you for reporting this. There has been an ongoing investigation of this area. Fort Mill Road has been on watch for almost a year now, showing frequent criminal activity within the last few months." I was confused. She continued, "There have been 7 reports of burglary alone in this tight area, mostly dealing with cars being broken into down the road where the nature park is." Again, Faith and I hadn't known much about the area since we were transfer students. I had no idea a nature park was nearby at all, let alone anything else. "Officer, we just moved into this home. We're renting it from a man named James who claims to be renting out these homes to college kids who need cheap housing. Do you know what's going on with our neighbors?" The officer looked at me like I had spoken gibberish. "You're renting this house? From whom?" "Ladies, these homes have been abandoned. We believe that this person named James is at the center of the situation." I frantically looked toward the homes. I remembered how Faith and I saw lights glowing from within last night. They were inhabited, as James put it. Families were supposed to be renting them out as well. I looked over at the officer. "But, we both saw those homes lit up inside last night. People had to be in them. I'm not going crazy." Faith turned to me. "That's why we didn't see any cars. We didn't even see any people leave or enter. I knew something was wrong here, Aaron. We didn't check everything out." I knew she was right. I was suspicious the entire time but was afraid to speak up and bother this guy. This whole scenario was set up and planned out so perfectly that you wouldn't think it was that strange. We saw some weird stuff but decided it wasn't enough to scare us away. "I'm helping you ladies take your belongings to the car. We need to get you out of this area. It isn't safe and is barely a suitable place for anyone to live, let alone 2 young college students. We will document this in the report and investigate Fort Mill immediately." My stomach was sick. I couldn't believe that this guy fooled us. How? I was just thankful we ended it here, on day 2. If we stayed any longer, I'm honestly not sure what would have occurred that night. We drove home, and later that night we received a call from Officer Doherty, who had helped us that morning. "Hello, Aaron. Are you both doing all right?" I told her that we were okay but asked if she had any updates on Fort Mill. She paused. "Well, we do. I want to first say that I am so glad you called when you did." I suddenly felt sick again. What was she about to tell me? She continued, "We have new information on the situation. James Riviera was the gentleman who claimed to have rented out the house to you. We caught him later this afternoon and were able to retrieve your belongings, except for the wallet. I'm sure you've notified your bank and credit providers." I felt so down and stupid for falling into this trap. Faith looked ashamed but relieved. "We have also found out what was going on with those homes on Fort Mill Road." I gulped. "Ladies, Mr. Riviera has not only been burglarizing cars and homes but also scamming college students by luring them into the abandoned homes. He has been claiming that the homes are available for rent and suitable for use because he knew that water was currently running inside and had somehow connected a power source to them. We are trying to find where he was living, as we are finding power lines on the side of the home with some running under the soil. Our team has managed to shut down his Craigslist account and posts." I was stunned. I had no words, and neither did Faith. We just looked at each other. The officer continued, "You're both safe now, and that's what matters. I'm not sure what else Mr. Riviera had planned, but he seems to have just started this Craigslist scam recently, possibly 2 months ago. Please be more cautious next time, girls. We're alerting the campus so officials can take any needed steps to protect the students." Faith took the phone from me. "Did you ever find out what was going on in those homes across from us?" Officer Doherty's tone changed as she spoke. "Yes. The other homes were abandoned, and Mr. Riviera had them hooked up somehow to a timer daily." "Realistic, huh? Our police have been investigating for months, and we hadn't seen this. Mr. Riviera had the homes synchronized to appear lit at dusk. As soon as sunset came around, the homes were programmed to light up inside every night. He fooled people, having these homes look occupied. Evil genius, really," she sarcastically finished. I felt so exhausted, even from just hearing this whole psychotic situation spelled out for us. "Inhabited," I mumbled to myself. I remember him using that stupid word. I should have known he was crazy. Who talks like that? It's just how it is, ladies. Criminals prey on unsuspecting people. Unfortunately for college kids, they're well aware of your nature. You kids tend to be more gullible, and they know that. Top it off with the need for cheap housing, and they found a match. She was spot on. The thing is, we felt safe. In this new, rural town we called our home during college, we didn't feel scared. I don't know why, but sometimes we become too trusting of strangers in certain contexts. I suspected people out here were the epitome of small town, inviting and generous. They seemed naturally warm and friendly. We had signs but ignored them. As a warning, make it a priority to verify everything before determining your next move. As a college student, I learned the painful way and hope no one makes a mistake like this anymore.